Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jordan Worth. Alexander Skeel was born on August 17, 1995, in Kingston upon Hull. He grew up in a loving and supportive family. The boys spent their first months in the hospital in special rooms for premature babies, where they fought against very low body weight. Thankfully, with the help of skilled doctors, the children began to recover. However, Alexander's brother gained weight more quickly, and by their first birthday, he showed almost no signs of being premature. In contrast, Alexander was weaker and dealt with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is the excessive buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to him being classified as disabled. Despite these health challenges from birth, Alexander's intellectual growth was unaffected, and physically, he was similar to his classmates. He even participated actively in sports at school. Their parents adored their sons from a young age, showering them with love and care while investing time and money in their education and overall well-being. After graduating from high school, both brothers enrolled in the prestigious Bedford College to continue their studies. Alexander was intelligent, attractive, and made an effort to go to the gym regularly, which helped him gain attention from women. However, unlike his brother, who actively dated and had a vibrant social life, Alexander was shy and preferred to concentrate on his studies. In college, Alexander experienced love at first sight when he met a stunning girl named Jordan Worth. They were the same age, and Jordan came from a wealthy family. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted and rarely faced rejection. She always dressed elegantly, took great care of her appearance, and enjoyed a vibrant social life. Jordan was one of the most popular girls on campus and attracted the attention of many admirers. Besides her studies, she volunteered her time, raising funds and providing aid to local shelters for homeless animals as well as to children facing hunger in Africa. Jordan's efforts to make a positive impact were recognized multiple times. At first, her appeared to be an angel, kind, caring, smart, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her instantly but assumed that the outgoing and popular Jordan would never notice him. To his surprise, she was also drawn to him and took the first step to get to know him. Although Jordan was more experienced in relationships, for the shy Alexander, she was his very first love. The couple started dating in 2012 when they were both just 17 years old. Initially, their relationship was thriving. They spent a lot of time together and were nearly inseparable. At college, they were often referred to as the most beautiful couple, which made Jordan feel very flattered. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They surprised each other with thoughtful gifts and enjoyed celebrating small but meaningful milestones. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of them together, showcasing their happiness and featuring heartfelt captions and declarations of love. To outsiders, it appeared that they were perfect for each other and destined for a long, happy life together. They quickly decided to move in together and rented an apartment. As they were both still students, their parents provided substantial financial support. Fortunately, their parents were supportive of their relationship. Jordan was particularly fond of Alexander's parents because she came across as a responsible young woman with aspirations to become an art history teacher, leaving a positive impression on everyone she met. As time went on, Jordan's behavior started to change. It began with her increasing demands. Each month, she wanted Alexander to update her on everything he did. She openly checked his personal messages on his phone, email, and social media. She would get jealous for no apparent reason. Although this behavior was concerning, Alexander tried to ignore it because he was in love, and it didn't bother him too much. Even when she insisted he wore only the clothes she bought for him, he dismissed it as her way of showing care. Soon, Jordan began to restrict Alexander's social circle. She decided who he could see and who he could no longer stay in touch with, affecting not just his friends and classmates but also his family members. Despite this control, Jordan never complained to anyone, and they still appeared to be a happy and perfect couple in public and on social media. She began to enjoy her control over him. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even replied to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting way. Afterward, she deleted these conversations, so Alexander had no idea what he had said to people who no longer wanted to communicate with him. The final reason for the breakup occurred when Alexander's twin brother raised concerns. Jordan started to block their communication. By then, their parents also noticed that Alexander was pulling away from the family, while his girlfriend was avoiding them completely. She refused to visit even on holidays and didn't want to talk on the phone. When they did try to reach her, she was openly rude. In the rare moments when Alexander's mother managed to speak with him, she urged him to break up with his girlfriend, warning that the relationship would lead to trouble. However, Alexander, deeply in love, refused to listen and defended his girlfriend, insisting that she cared for him and meant no harm. The Skeel family soon realized that Jordan had pressured their son to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. Meanwhile, she took all the money he earned to spend on her own needs and entertainment. The parents once again tried to talk to their son and persuade him to leave Jordan, but they were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his coming-of-age celebration, Jordan committed a shocking act that went unpunished. That day, she and her friends celebrated at a country hotel. As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Jordan suddenly vanished without telling anyone. Alexander was distraught as he searched for Jordan, fearing something had happened to her. However, she returned to their room in the morning, heavily intoxicated. When Alexander tried to find out where she had been, she violently lashed out at him with both fists and insults, then laughed. 2 months later, during his own 18th birthday celebration, Jordan started a fight in front of Alexander's family and friends. She assaulted a 15-year-old girl, who was a neighbor well known to the Skeel family and had been invited to the party. Jordan believed the girl was being overly friendly with Alexander, which prompted her to attack, pulling the girl's hair and scratching her face. Jordan was still upset, but it was obvious to everyone what her true nature was. Afterward, her parents and brother urged Alexander to break up with her because of her aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Surprisingly, for the first time, he listened to them and acknowledged that she had indeed overreacted. That same evening, he spoke with her and informed her that he would not be returning to their apartment and would instead stay at his parents' house. After nearly 6 months apart, they reunited and had children together. During that time, Alexander focused on his studies and work, rarely thinking of Jordan. However, on New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised him with a call to share the news that she was pregnant and they would be parents in the spring. Alexander felt both surprised and happy. Jordan apologized for not telling him sooner, explaining that she believed he no longer wanted to see her. When the guy's parents found out they were going to have a grandchild, they were overjoyed and invited Jordan to move in with them. She accepted the offer and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially got married with Alexander, and 3 months later, she and Alexander welcomed a son named William. The young parents were extremely happy, and they enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life together until around mid-fall 2014. During this time, Jordan genuinely cared for her partner, made an effort to please him, and fell in love with him again. When William was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. During this time, she became moody and emotional, insisting that Alexander move out of his parents' house immediately. Alexander attributed her behavior to hormonal changes but agreed to rent an apartment for them in the city, and they soon moved in. In the summer of 2015, they welcomed their second child, a girl named Alice. Alexander was overjoyed and treated his wife and children with great affection. However, Jordan, feeling secure that Alexander would not leave her, began to reveal her darker side. The turning point occurred after the move. Jordan prohibited her husband from contacting his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Meanwhile, she accepted financial help from them and even had Alexander ask his parents for money. Within a few months, she completely dominated him, breaking his spirit and taking control of his life. Jordan frequently humiliated and insulted her husband, and eventually, she began to hit him. At first, her attacks were not severe, as she wanted to see how he would react. When she realized he would tolerate everything, keep quiet, and face no consequences for her actions, she unleashed her cruelty, revealing her violent tendencies. The trouble began during their house renovation when she was unhappy with everything Alexander did. Frustrated, he remarked that it seemed impossible to satisfy her. In response, she threw a hammer at him, hitting him on the head and causing a deep wound. Dazed and nearly unconscious, he fell to the ground, holding his head as blood streamed down his face. He asked his wife for help or to call an ambulance, but she coldly told him, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and walked into another room to watch TV. Alexander treated his head injury on his own without visiting a doctor or telling anyone. This led Jordan to believe she could do anything without consequences, convinced her husband would never report her actions and would avoid both hospitals and the police. For the next 3 years, Alexander endured constant emotional and physical suffering. He became so depressed that he didn't recognize the threat he was under. Despite this, he continued to work hard to provide for his family, but his frustration and dissatisfaction with his wife grew steadily. Jordan not only controlled him every day but also escalated the cruelty. He was not allowed to sleep on the bed and had to lie on the floor next to the bed, without a blanket or pillow. He was also banned from entering the kitchen and could only eat the leftovers that his wife and children didn't finish. This left Alexander starving. As he was unable to buy food, Jordan had taken all his money. Furthermore, his wife deprived him of sleep and rest, creating a cruel form of entertainment for herself. Whenever he finally fell asleep, she would hit him on the head or pour boiling water on him. He later remembered waking up each time in intense pain, either bleeding or burned. After that, he would tend to his wounds with whatever he could find, while his wife quietly went to bed. Alexander viewed this situation as normal. He felt morally defeated and stopped trying to fight against it. He completely cut off communication with his parents and brother, and his wife frequently asked them for money on his behalf. She also supported her own parents financially, ensuring she could afford whatever she wanted. Alexander lost a significant amount of weight and dropped below 50 pounds. His body was frequently marked by wounds, cuts, burns, and bruises, which drew concern from others. At his workplace, colleagues encouraged him to seek medical help, but his wife insisted he quit his job to avoid being discovered. After he was let go, he became trapped with Jordan, who began to abuse him continuously, leaving him longing for rescue. Although the couple appeared to be happy to outsiders, their home life was filled with horror. Jordan managed social media accounts for her husband, frequently sharing old photos of their family along with captions expressing their love and gratitude for one another. Nobody could have imagined that a woman who looked angelic and was a mother of 2 could transform into a sophisticated monster behind closed doors. She knocked out her husband's teeth and inflicted a deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body also showed signs of burns, but he was unable to go to the hospital. At home, he had only plastic wrap and tape, which he used to bind his wounds. Neighbors often heard screams coming from their house, and some were so alarming that they called the police. However, Jordan always managed to convince the officers that everything was fine between her and her husband. During the next visit by the police, prompted by neighbors' concerns, one officer noticed a man with a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. The man appeared emaciated and had bruises of various sizes on his face. Jordan attempted to explain to the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes harmed himself. However, this time the police called for paramedics, and Alexander was taken to the hospital. The doctors were shocked by his condition. He was barely alive, and his arm was so severely injured that amputation was a real possibility. Alexander had severe second and third-degree burns covering his body. He weighed just 94 pounds, and his shoulder ligaments were injured from being hit with a screwdriver. He also had a deep cut on his forearm, several knocked-out teeth, and many bruises. During this time, Jordan entered the hospital, insisting that her husband be released to her. She claimed that he was fine and that he had caused all his injuries himself. However, no one believed her distressed claims, and it was decided to take her to the police station for questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing and stuck to her claim that her husband was harming himself. However, when Alexander's parents arrived at the police station after visiting him in the hospital, her attitude changed. She went on to explain in detail the actions she had taken against her husband, saying she had trained him like a dog and that he couldn't escape from her. At the same time, Jordan argued that her husband's behavior provoked her violence, alleging he was cheating on her and intentionally trying to upset her. She also maintained that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-harm. The man's parents firmly denied all the claims made against him. However, he hesitated to speak out against his wife at first. It was only after receiving treatment and consulting with a psychologist that Alexander found the courage to share the traumatic experiences he endured at home in recent years. Jordan believed that she would only receive a minor administrative penalty, so she was not particularly concerned about the upcoming trial. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge convicted 22-year-old Jordan of deliberately causing serious harm, both physical and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She received a prison sentence of 7.5 years. Her status as a mother of 2 young children did not lessen the severity of her punishment. Jordan was taken aback by this sentence, as the case was unprecedented in the UK. The children were placed in the care of their father and grandparents during their mother's imprisonment. After fully recovering from years of abuse, Alexander began working in the community and is now helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan was released on parole after serving 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence. However, she is not allowed to approach her ex-husband or see their children. She is currently engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is getting ready to become a mother for the 3rd time. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ariel Castro. Ariel Castro was born in 1960 on July 10 in the city of Yauco in Puerto Rico. Ariel was the 3rd child in a poor family of 4 children, including parents Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, and sisters O'Neill, Pedro, and older sister Bonita. Ariel's family barely made ends meet and his parents were constantly arguing. Before Ariel went to school, his parents divorced. His mother Liliana took care of all the children. Now Liliana had almost nothing left to feed her children. In desperation, Liliana and her children decided to move to the United States and settled for a while in southeastern Pennsylvania in the city of Reading. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio and eventually settled in the city of Cleveland. Soon after, Ariel's father Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their children. Pedro Castro lived near Liliana and her children. Liliana later married, and Ariel soon had 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. In addition, Ariel also studied music and attended church regularly with her mother and siblings in a traditional Catholic family. As a teenager, Ariel met a young girl named Grimilda Figueroa, who lived next door to Castro. The two became friends while attending school, and Ariel and Grimilda later began dating. After saving money, Ariel and Grimilda decided to move to a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. The two-story, 1,300-square-foot house was built in 1890 and has been remodeled several times. Inside, there are 4 bedrooms, a dining room, a bathroom, and a spacious basement. However, since moving into the new house, Ariel regularly beats Grimilda and humiliates her morally and physically. Grimilda is still naive at this time and thinks that the situation will improve after the wedding and the birth of the child. However, as time goes by, the situation only gets worse. Grimilda tries not to let anyone know about the terrible things that are happening in her life. Grimilda hides her injuries under her clothes and makes up excuses for the injuries that cannot be hidden. In 1993, Ariel beat his wife so brutally that Grimilda suffered broken ribs, nose, and both arms from falling down the stairs after being pushed by Ariel. However, Grimilda steadfastly refused to report the incident to the police. The incident was covered up. Ariel repeatedly beat Grimilda in the mid-1990s. On one occasion, Ariel caused Grimilda a serious head injury that resulted in a blood clot and a tumor that could not be surgically removed. Ariel was arrested but released just a day later. By the late 90s, Grimilda was tired of the constant beatings and living in fear. Grimilda finally decided to file for divorce, took away the appliances, and moved out of the house. Grimilda won custody of all 4 of their children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia. However, Grimilda's nightmare did not end there. Ariel began to pursue Grimilda for money and threatened her to return to him. Realizing that Grimilda could not handle it on her own, Grimilda finally decided to report to the police to get a restraining order against Ariel. In late April 2012, Grimilda suffered complications related to an inoperable tumor caused by a head injury. Grimilda's children were old enough to care for themselves and live their own lives, so they did not need a guardian. However, the children still maintained contact with their father Ariel. Back in the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone in a 2-story house on Seymour Avenue. Ariel worked as a school bus driver and had a passion for playing the guitar. Ariel often performed at city festivals in Latin bands. His neighbors often spoke highly of him, praising his hospitality and kind personality. However, there were many strange things in Ariel's actions that went unnoticed. That he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations while driving a school bus. He had speeding and dangerously making U-turns, for which he was fined and even suspended for a while until he was fired in early 2013 for an act that threatened the lives and health of his young passengers. Additionally, Ariel frequently changed bands because Ariel was kicked out for being late, disrupting rehearsals and concerts. Another strange thing is that after his divorce from Grimilda, he never invited anyone to his house, although Ariel often invited neighbors to barbecues in his backyard. It's hard to say how dangerous this smiling, kindly-faced Ariel was. Michelle Knight was Ariel Castro's first victim. In 2002, on August 23, Ariel decided to kidnap Michelle Knight, then 21 years old. Michelle Knight was born in 1981 and came to Cleveland. Michelle was a frequent runaway and had a history with the police. After becoming a single mother, Michelle faced the risk of losing custody of her 2-year-old child. On the day of the incident, Michelle visited a relative's house and then had to go to court, where the issue of regaining custody of her 2-year-old child had just been decided. While walking down the street, Michelle saw Ariel Castro driving up and offering her a ride. Since Michelle knew the nearby school bus driver, she didn't suspect Ariel and decided to get in his car. On the way, Ariel tells Michelle that he is taking care of puppies at home and invites Michelle to visit them and help Ariel find homes for the puppies. Michelle agrees, but as soon as she enters Ariel's house, he changes completely. Ariel becomes violent and begins hitting Michelle repeatedly. Ariel then chains her up and takes her to the basement. Over the next few days, Ariel starved Michelle and denied her water. Michelle endured constant beatings and abuse. She could not even get up and had to beg Ariel to let her go, promising not to tell anyone about it. When Michelle's mother reported her daughter missing to the police, for years the police did not prioritize the case and allocated limited resources to the investigation. Michelle's family searched for the girl themselves by contacting neighbors, friends, and concerned people. They also asked for help from Ariel, who helped post flyers around the city with Michelle's picture. However, no one knew that Michelle was being held in Ariel's basement. Ariel's second character was Amanda Berry. This girl was kidnapped in the spring of 2003. Amanda was a young girl who lived near Ariel and worked at a local restaurant. She was born on April 22, 1986 and was about to celebrate her 17th birthday. However, on April 21, 2003, Amanda mysteriously disappeared. After her shift, Amanda called home and told her sister that she would be home soon. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed to the bus stop, Ariel drove up to her and offered to give Amanda a ride home. Amanda accepted. Amanda knew Ariel's son because they had been in the same class for many years. So Amanda trusted Ariel and agreed to go with him. However, Ariel lied to her along the way, saying that Ariel needed help. When Amanda entered Ariel's house, Amanda was trapped. Ariel raped her in public, then took Amanda to the basement. There, she met Michelle, who had been kidnapped and held captive for months. Amanda was also attacked, abused, and starved for days until Amanda's body was too weak to resist. A massive search was launched after Amanda went missing. Her disappearance was widely reported in the media and Amanda's parents appeared on popular television shows such as Oprah Winfrey and Montel Williams. They shared their story and urged anyone with information about Amanda's whereabouts to contact them immediately. On one show, famous psychic Sylvia Brown was invited on. After viewing a photo of Amanda, she said that the girl had died and her body was in the water. The words troubled Amanda's parents, but the mother, Louise Miller, continued to search for her daughter until she died in March 2006 of a heart attack. In 2012, a criminal named Robert Wolford suddenly confessed to Amanda's murder and offered to show them where her body was buried. Robert led police to a vacant lot in West Cleveland, claiming that he had buried Amanda there. However, a lengthy search failed to uncover any trace. Robert was later found to have lied for fame and television, leading to his being sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison for perjury and obstructing justice. In April 2004. This time, Ariel chose Gina De Jesus, a 14-year-old girl in his daughter's class. Ariel met Gina and another girlfriend after school. After chatting for a while, the two girls decided to go home separately. When they reached the corner of West 105th Street, Ariel met Gina and offered to take Gina home. Since Gina had known Ariel since childhood, having long been the father of her best friend, Gina got into Ariel's car without suspecting anything. Although it was daytime, there were no witnesses to the kidnapping because the streets were deserted at that time. In addition, Gina took the initiative to get into Ariel's car, so there was no easily detectable conflict. The story of Gina's disappearance was aired on Fox TV's America's Most Wanted and was re-aired twice in 2005 and 2006. Ariel also posed as a volunteer looking for missing girls. When she brought Gina home, Ariel treated Gina similarly to Michelle and Amanda. Abused, sexually assaulted, and locked in the basement. It is believed that the kidnapping was carried out by a middle-aged Hispanic man. Was seen by a passerby, There was even a sketch that looked very similar to Ariel. During the 10 years of their captivity, Ariel constantly abused her victims. They were often starved, attempting to break their spirits and destroy their self-esteem. Severe punishments were also carried out if the three girls did not comply. Michelle, the oldest captive, suffered the most. Ariel would not spare her and would often beat Michelle to intimidate the other girls, forcing them to obey without asking any questions. After years of captivity in the dark and damp basement, Ariel moved them to a room on the second floor, which overlooked the courtyard. During her captivity, Michelle became pregnant at least 5 times. However, each time she showed signs of pregnancy, Ariel brutally attempted to terminate the pregnancy, starving Michelle and kicking her in the stomach until Michelle miscarried. After one brutal torture, Michelle almost died from severe blood loss. Despite this, Ariel remained completely indifferent and refused to let her call a rescue vehicle. The girls were not allowed to bathe more than once a week. To use the toilet, they had only a bucket of water, which Ariel rarely emptied. Ariel only fed the girls once a day but constantly beat and abused them. One day, Ariel gives the girls a puppy, but a week later, Ariel brutally kills the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, in 2006, Amanda realizes she is pregnant and is horrified by the image of Ariel beating her to induce a miscarriage. Ariel this time let Amanda get pregnant and give birth. In preparation for the birth, he bought a special inflatable float. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter named Jocelyn. Although the baby was born weak, she was lucky to survive. As Jocelyn grew older, the girls began to care for her and create a close environment for her. This helped them temporarily forget the difficult situation they were in. Ariel also changed significantly after having his daughters. Ariel began giving the 3 girls he kidnapped small gifts and sometimes letting them out into the yard with Jocelyn, but always under close supervision. Jocelyn was developing well, speaking clearly, and being taught to read, write, and count by her mother. Outwardly, she appeared healthy, well cared for and well fed. Despite being imprisoned for years under Ariel's relentless control, the victims attempted to escape many times, but each time they were brutally punished, but the girls never gave up hope. However, on May 6, 2013, Ariel left the house and forgot to lock one of the interior doors. This gave Amanda an opportunity. She left the room and went to the window that looked out onto the street. When Amanda saw a neighbor walking past the house, Amanda began banging and screaming at the window. A man heard a strange noise and stopped, thinking someone needed help. Another neighbor also heard the screams and decided to call emergency services. While waiting for the police to arrive, the men broke the lock on the front door and helped Amanda and her young daughter escape. When the police arrived, Amanda told them that her name was Amanda Berry and that she had been kidnapped 10 years ago. Amanda also said that 2 other kidnapped girls were being held in a house, in other apartments. All 3 were rescued and taken to hospital the same day. Amanda, her younger daughter Jocelyn, and Gina were not in critical condition, but Michelle had suffered severe physical and mental damage from the constant abuse. Michelle lost hearing in one ear and almost lost sight in her left eye. Many of Michelle's bones were bent and would not heal, requiring plastic surgery to restore the shape of her disfigured face. After the trauma and forced abortion, Michelle was unable to have children. When police received a report of 3 missing girls and a baby found in Ariel's home, Ariel Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot just an hour later. Ariel's brothers, O'Neill and Pedro, were also arrested on suspicion of involvement, as they had been frequent visitors to Ariel's home. However, they were quickly released due to lack of evidence linking them to the case, as the victims had confirmed. Ariel was charged with forcible kidnapping, assault, battery, forcible confinement, cruelty, and taking the life of an unborn child. Ariel could have received a common-law conviction. However, the prosecution required a death sentence. Ariel agreed to cooperate with the investigation and pleaded guilty. Ariel would recount all the events that took place in his home. In return, he would not be sentenced to death but instead to life in prison. Surprisingly, Ariel recalls in great detail the days of kidnapping the girls and bringing them into his home. Ariel recounted all the torture and abuse he had inflicted on his victims, but blamed the girls for unwittingly agreeing to get into Ariel's car and condemned himself to such a fate. On August 1, 2013, Ariel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On July 9, 2013, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus began a new life after being released from the Insanity's custody. After his conviction, Ariel was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Orient, Ohio, where he was closely monitored. However, on September 3, 2013, Ariel was found dead in his cell. At the time, Ariel was 53 years old. Ariel Castro's family members have apologized to the victims and their families. Michelle Knight wrote a book titled Life After Darkness: Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnapping in 2018. Gina De Jesus also published a memoir titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. There are also multiple documentary projects and 2 feature films about the terrifying kidnapping mission. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Davis. Lucy Davis was born in 1971 in the picturesque town of Penimprid, Wales. Her childhood was filled with love and warmth, thanks to her parents, Roger and Andre, who created a happy and comfortable home. Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glenk with her younger sister, Anna. Lucy took her first steps surrounded by majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her kind nature and charming smile make her stand out, becoming a dynamic and special individual among those around her. Lucy easily gained the sympathy of her teachers and classmates. She developed a passion for horseback riding at a young age and had an endless love for horses. Seeing how eager Lucy was, her father arranged for her and her younger sister to take horse riding lessons with experienced instructors. They mastered the basics of this noble art, conquering challenges and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became skilled horse riders. Lucy Davis had a wonderful childhood in Wales, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the love of family and community, which helped her grow and develop. Lucy and Anna developed a passion for horse riding, which not only brought them companions but also taught them valuable life skills such as discipline, self-control, and responsibility. Their talent and perseverance earned them recognition at prestigious competitions, where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's interests extended beyond horse riding. With a curious mind and a desire for knowledge, Lucy explored other passions, including music. She took flute and piano lessons, diligently honing her skills, and within a year, she had mastered both instruments, captivating audiences with her performances. This led to her joining the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where she continued to refine her musical talents. Lucy also participates in the school choir, which allows her to express her creativity and love of music. Lucy Davis's childhood was a balance of fun and dedication, marked by hard work and eager to learn. These qualities formed a strong base that would support her future successes and help her become an extraordinary person. In high school, Lucy became close friends with Garrick Jenkinson, a quiet and enigmatic young man from Wales. Despite not knowing much about his background, but they developed a strong and lasting connection. Garrett and Lucy became closer friends as time passed. However, Garrett secretly harbored romantic feelings for Lucy. After graduating from high school in 1998, Lucy pursued her passion for music and enrolled at the University of Yorkshire in Northern England. She initially aspired to become a music teacher but later realized her true desire was to create art in a major city. This realization led Lucy to meet Grimmy McAllister, whose perspective and humor aligned with hers. As their connection grew, Lucy introduced Grimmy to her parents, Roger and Andre. The introduction was a success, and Lucy's parents saw Grimmy as an ideal partner for their daughter. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimmy chose to live together and start a family. In 1995, while in college, the couple had a son named James and Anne. To care for their child, Lucy took a break from her studies, while Grimmy continued his education and worked night shifts at the postal sorting department to support their family. Despite the challenges she faced, Lucy was hopeful about their future, driven by her love for her family and her aspirations for a better life. However, spending months at home with the baby took a toll on her, and she began to feel lonely. The fact that she and Grimmy rarely spent time together, due to his night shifts, made the problem even worse. Seeking companionship and someone to talk to, Lucy created a social media account under the nickname Miseria. This virtual outlet allowed her to share her experiences and connect with others. One user in particular caught her attention, Harold Landry, a 53 years old, he from Louisiana who had grown up in poverty and was fixated on achieving independence and success. Harold put in a lot of work and eventually came to an important insight. He understood that real wealth came not from owning oil wells, but from providing the essential tools and machinery needed to keep them running. With this insight, he founded a company that specializes in manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As his business thrived, Harold's fortunes grew, earning him not only financial security but also prestige and, eventually, the status of a billionaire. For Lucy, conversing with Harold was invigorating. She was captivated by his life experiences, dedication, and generosity. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. The significant gaps in their age, social standing, and lifestyle often caused friction between them. When Harold and Lucy first met, Harold's life seemed to be a confusing combination of luxury in many different experiences. He indulged in unusual hobbies, acquired luxury items, and owned real estate on KML Island in Mexico. There is no information about his previous marriages. He was married and divorced twice, but it is not known whether he had children from these marriages. Harold's life underwent a major transformation in 1992. Following his second divorce, he met Geraldine, a woman 20 years his junior, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico. At the time, Geraldine was married to Chris Price and had 2 children. Despite Geraldine being married, but Harold successfully captured her heart. On February 6, 1994, Harold planned a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They employed Christian Hurton as a babysitter for their children, giving them the opportunity to enjoy a romantic evening by themselves, free from childcare responsibilities. After dinner, Harold walked Geraldine home and then offered to drive Christian home as a thank you. Unbeknownst to Harold, Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been monitoring the couple's secret affair. Chris, who was watching from his car, decided to confront Harold. He chased after him, finally catching up at a red light. Chris rushed towards Harold, shouting accusations. Harold remained calm, pulled out a gun, and warned Chris to back off. Enraged, Chris dared Harold to shoot. Without hesitation, Harold fired, hitting Chris in the neck. Fortunately, Chris received prompt medical treatment from a nearby hospital, and which saved his life. In 1997, Harold was tried in St. Mary Parish Court for the attempted murder of Chris Price. His lawyer, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold was a victim of a setup. The jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after appealing, Harold was released on parole, required to pay a fine and perform community service. Harold was thankful to Pete for his assistance, and they formed a friendship. Harold and Chris reached a settlement, but the details of the compensation were kept private. Harold then lived in Covington as a wealthy man, openly discussing his past with Lucy, including his previous failed marriages and a traumatic incident. Lucy became more attracted to Harold after he shared his secrets. She was captivated by his persuasive nature. After Lucy ended her relationship with Grimmy, she and Harold chose to start dating. To shield them from unwanted issues, Harold aimed to steer clear of trouble. In early 2000, Harold visited England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre. Although they were initially surprised by the age gap, they supported their daughter's decision and didn't meddle in the relationship. Harold gave Lucy many costly presents because he wanted to fulfill all her wishes. His love was intense, and he contemplated marriage, but wanted everything to be flawless. Harold plans a trip to Mexico to strengthen his relationship, inviting Lucy, her son James, and her ex-husband Grimmy to join them on this special journey. Mexico was a paradise for Harold, and having his friend and lawyer Pete's apartment nearby added to the trip's comfort. Harold had recently bought a diamond engagement ring and shared the news with Pete. However, Pete suspected Lucy was cheating on Harold due to her frequent meetings with Grimmy. Despite Pete's warnings, Harold proposed to Lucy, blinded by his love for her. She accepted his proposal. In mid-2003, Harold and Lucy got married. Harold purchased a $1 million home in Warshire County, and they started a new life together. Their neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, were friendly and helped them feel welcome in the area. After the wedding, Lucy gave birth to a daughter named Harth. Harold also welcomed James, Lucy's son from her previous marriage, into their family and treated him as his own. Over time, Lucy and Harold's relationship began to deteriorate. Harold became increasingly controlling, expecting Lucy to obey him completely. However, Lucy was an independent person and refused to comply with Harold's demands. As a result, arguments and disagreements became more frequent, creating a tense atmosphere at home. Their son, James, had a difficult and unhappy childhood due to his family's stressful environment. Lucy and Harold's relationship was deteriorating, and their neighbors took notice. The situation was made worse by their growing reliance on alcohol, which added to their existing problems. However, when the arguing and shouting stopped, neighbors thought the couple was trying to resolve their issues. In 2009, Lucy reconnected with her old school friend Garrett on social media. Their online conversations became a source of comfort for Lucy during a difficult time in her life. As Harold sensed Lucy's growing distance, he realized she was seeking solace in another man. Not wanting to confront the situation, Harold left for Mexico, leaving Lucy alone. During his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit. Harold was surprised when he got home. Shortly after, Lucy filed for divorce. And Harold began an affair with their neighbor, Rachel. Harold and Lucy's divorce proceedings were complicated by disagreements over dividing their assets. Lucy wanted to keep the family home for the sake of their children, while Harold was adamant that they sell it and offered her a financial settlement instead. The situation between Lucy and Harold became increasingly heated, and Lucy revealed some of Harold's past secrets. When Lucy returns home, the arguments continue, and the tension between her and Harold causes Jameson and Harth much suffering. On the evening of Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold was drinking wine when a package intended for his neighbor, Stephen Kennedy, was mistakenly delivered to his address. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen stopped by Harold's house to collect his package after noticing the delivery notification. Upon arriving, Stephen was greeted by Harold, then Harold offered him a glass of wine. Although Harold had already been drinking and was visibly intoxicated, Stephen accepted the offer. After a brief visit, during which he collected his package and exchanged greetings with Lucy, and Stephen left. Harold and Lucy's argument soon resumed, this time centering on Lucy's plans to buy furniture for her new home. James rushed into the kitchen after hearing a commotion and witnessed Harold physically abusing his mother with a kitchen utensil. James immediately called the police and comforted his younger sister. Meanwhile, Lucy grabbed the children and attempted to escape the house, heading to Stephen's residence in search of help. However, Harold caught up with her during the escape and violently attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. He then dragged her body under a nearby bush, attempting to conceal the crime. Upon hearing the screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered Lucy's lifeless body. Initially, he thought she had fainted, but soon realized the gravity of the situation. Police officer Steve C. Fox arrived at the crime scene and immediately called for an ambulance. He then began searching the neighborhood for Harold, but unfortunately, he was unable to find Harold. The children, traumatized and frightened, hid in the house until the police arrived. A tragic incident drastically altered the family's life, leading to a prolonged and challenging struggle for justice. An ambulance quickly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but unfortunately, she succumbed after to the hospital. At the same time, a fearful Harold knocked on his friend Rachel's door, his voice shaking. He confessed to doing something terrible, but didn't reveal what it was. Harold then gave Rachel a large sum of money, $40,000, along with all his cash, car keys, and paychecks. After that, he headed home. Meanwhile, the police were searching for Harold. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but he seemed to have vanished. However, luck eventually turned in the detectives' favor, and Harold was arrested on his way back from Rachel's house. His face, filled with fear and remorse, was telling. Lucy's family, including her parents Roger and Andre, were overcome with grief. In a statement to the press, they expressed their profound sorrow at the loss of their daughter and chose not to make any additional comments. The forensic examination confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. The investigation relied heavily on evidence discovered at the crime scene and a key eyewitness account from James, Lucy's son, who saw the tragic event unfold. February 24, 2011, was a day of tension in the courtroom, as everyone waited anxiously for the verdict in the trial of 64-year-old Harold Landry, who was accused of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy. The jury had just delivered their guilty verdict, and the air was thick with bitterness and loss. Harold should have been Lucy's rock and protector, stood accused of her murder. His lawyer and friend, Pete, had passed the case to experienced attorney Andy Child, who faced an uphill battle in defending Harold. The defense's task was to convince the court that Harold never intended to take Lucy's life. The defense claimed that Harold acted in response to Lucy's aggressive behavior. Overcome with emotion, Harold swore he loved his wife and was consumed by remorse, insisting he never meant to hurt her. As part of his defense strategy, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection with Lucy's death. However, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including disturbing photographs of multiple wounds on Lucy's body. The brutality of Harold's attack left no doubt about his guilt. After a thorough review of the evidence, the court delivered its verdict. Harold Landry was found guilty of Lucy's death and sentenced to life in prison. He must serve 16 years before being eligible for parole, at which point he will be 82 years old. The story of Harold and Lucy is a tragic love story. Although the trial is over, the consequences of this tragedy still linger. Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, felt that the verdict was fair, but it did not alleviate their grief. Meanwhile, Harold Landry maintained his innocence and vowed to appeal the decision. He claimed that he would not change anything, even with the benefit of hindsight. Harold has been held accountable for his actions. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Zara Alina. Zara Alina was born in England in the winter of 1986. As the eldest of 5 children, Zara's birth held great significance, symbolizing her mother's aspirations for a better future. Additionally, she was the first granddaughter of Radha Parvin, a distinction that earned her special respect and status within the family. Growing up, Zara was doted on by her relatives and raised in a multi-generational household. Despite their financial struggles, Zara's parents prioritized her education, believing it would provide her with a good life. Zara's family had big plans for her future, but their hopes were overshadowed by the dangers and difficulties that surrounded them, putting Zara's safety at risk. Zara had an unrelenting passion and thirst for life from a very young age. This led her to develop a love for tap dancing, a form of self-expression where each step brought out a rhythm that evoked a sense of harmony. Additionally, and swimming, which gave her a sense of freedom from the monotony of daily life. Her exquisite style and artistic approach to fashion allowed her to express her dreams through her outfits. However, these pursuits were just the beginning of her journey. Her first experience with skating ignited a new sense of freedom within her. Skating evolved into more than just a hobby for her. It became a powerful outlet for self-expression, allowing her to connect with her deepest emotions and inner self. Those close to Zara were unsurprised when she shared her aspiration to become a lawyer, driven by a desire to protect and support others. Her warm personality spread happiness and positivity, making those around her feel uplifted and inspired. Zara's eyes sparkled, and her gaze was captivating. Her curly black hair added to her striking appearance. She has a magnetic appeal, combining qualities such as passion, kindness, and courage, along with undeniable charm. As a teenager, she had the chance to explore England, visiting museums and galleries that fueled her interest in art and culture. Her travels showcased independence and unrelenting passion for knowledge and discovery. Following her initial trips, she later traveled to other parts of Europe. These adventures show that she inherited her family's passion for discovery and exploration of new things. Zara's aunt, Farah, was a significant influence on her. Unlike many others who chose to settle in the UK, Farah settled in Portugal. What captivated Zara was her aunt's work as a psychotherapist, particularly her involvement with women's organizations. As a result, Zara made it a point to visit her aunt on multiple occasions. Zara began turning her dreams into a reality when she earned admission to the University of Westminster immediately after high school graduation. She dedicated herself to pursuing her objectives, all while taking care of her mother and grandmother at the same time. Although she was short, she had endless energy and a deeply passionate personality. Zara is a compassionate person who has positively impacted the lives of many refugees forced to flee their homes due to conflict, she using her influence to speak out about their stories. She also volunteered at community canteens, aiding the homeless. Zara has a remarkable talent for understanding what others need, and she always makes time for them a priority in her busy schedule. Her easygoing personality made her a delight to be around. She frequently visited her aunt, Smee Naz, who lived nearby, often seeking her help with exam preparation, but their study sessions inevitably turned into laughter-filled moments. Those who knew Zara remember that she brought happiness wherever she went. Moreover, she was diligent, covering her own expenses and providing support to her family. Zara was a familiar face at a local clothing store where she worked and interacted with everyone in the community, from teenagers to the elderly. Her kindness and willingness to help others were notable traits. Despite being talkative, she was a good listener and extended her generosity to all living beings, especially cats. She would often spend her own money to care for stray cats, taking them to the vet or convincing neighbors to adopt them. Zara's friend, Sanji Naira, described her as radiant and thought that her most significant gift was her ability to share optimism with others. Whenever Sanji was down, he would turn to Zara for help. Zara had a special person in her life, Carissa Peters, who was more than just a friend. They formed a strong bond as they fought together for justice and women's rights, a common goal that forged a lasting friendship despite life's obstacles. They felt a strong sense of comfort and familiarity in each other's homes and maintained a daily phone routine, using this time to share news, discuss their thoughts, and make plans for the future. After passing her exams and completing her law internship in 2002, Zara had the opportunity to work at the Crown Prosecution Service. This was a significant step toward realizing her dream of becoming a full-fledged lawyer. To achieve this, Zara persevered with her work despite facing many difficulties, including worries from her mother and grandmother, as well as financial struggles. This achievement was significant for her and for the people who believed in, supported her through the challenges she faced on her path to a better life. On her first day at the new job, Zara felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. She shared a smiley selfie with friends and family, as if announcing the start of a new chapter in her life to the world. This new job was the final piece in the puzzle of her dreams, a culmination of years of hard work. Although being an administrator might seem like a secondary role to some, it was a significant milestone for Zara. At 35 years old, she entered a new phase of her life, which sparked in her a sense of excitement and determination that filled her with a clear direction and goal. This wasn't just another working day. It marked the beginning of a new era in her life, one where she felt truly fulfilled and happy. The new job boosted Zara's confidence, and she felt it was time to start her own family. She envisioned her children living happy, protected lives filled with love and harmony. With each passing day, Zara saw herself moving closer to her dream of having a family. Her life was busy with work, volunteering, friends, and support from her mother and grandmother, who shared her home and provided care when needed. Despite her packed schedule, Zara enjoyed walking and valued her freedom of movement. She didn't let small things hold her back and would often carry a spare pair of shoes in her bag to change into sneakers when needed. Zara believed that women should be able to move freely without any obstacles or restrictions. However, a man named Jordan McSweeney, who lived nearby, posed a threat to Zara's freedom. Jordan was a few years younger than Zara, and his origins were unknown. One Saturday evening, after the sun had set, Zara was on her way to meet a friend. Despite not being in the mood, but she chose not to cancel, honoring her commitment. Zara was recognized for being extremely reliable and keeping her commitments, especially to her friends. Before leaving, she called Aunt Farah, but this time, a hint of anxiety crept into her voice. Aunt Farah cautioned Zara to be careful, and although she wasn't venturing far from home, the evening atmosphere felt unusual and unpredictable. Zara assured herself that she was familiar with every part of the city and that people knew who she was. Nevertheless, something about this evening unsettled her, making her heart beat faster, and she decided to exercise extra caution. Zara met her friend at the Ilford Big Spoon, a local bar on London's West End, at the scheduled time. Ilford in London is a vibrant and culturally diverse neighborhood ideal for evening meals and socializing. One Saturday evening, Zara and her friend came to this area. They then headed to another bar, where Zara had a couple of glasses of water. Meanwhile, Jordan was at a nearby nightclub, having one drink after another. As he drank, an idea formed in his mind, and he decided to act on it. He was determined to find a woman to attack that night. Security cameras captured Jordan's behavior at the club's entrance, where he would hug and try to kiss women without their consent. He was particularly aggressive with one employee, despite her clear discomfort. Eventually, he was kicked out of the club around 11 p.m., and his behavior was recorded on camera. After leaving the club, cameras continued to capture Jordan's actions as he walked down Romford Street towards the park. As Jordan walked, he spotted a woman and began to follow her. Jordan approached her, and she tried to avoid him by entering a store. However, Jordan waited for her outside, and when she left the store, he followed her again. He then crossed the street, keeping her in sight. When the woman entered her house, Jordan was forced to continue on his way. According to security footage, around 2 a.m. on Cranbrook Street, Jordan noticed another woman approaching him. Suddenly, Jordan quickened his pace, approaching a woman. However, two passing witnesses noticed his suspicious behavior, which was captured on video. Despite this, the woman managed to return home safely, leaving Jordan surprised and frustrated. He then returned to Cranbrook Street, having been unsuccessful. Around the same time, Zara and her friend decided to leave the bar and head home. It was 2 a.m. Her friend took a taxi, but Zara chose to walk, given the short distance and pleasant weather. As they parted ways, Zara began walking down Cranbrook Street, a residential area just a 10-minute walk from her house. It was then that Jordan spotted her. According to Chief Inspector Dave Williams, Jordan had a clear intention that night to attack a woman, regardless of the location. Cranbrook Street remained busy, even in the early hours, with a steady flow of traffic. Jordan had a history of offenses dating back to 2006 to 2009, for which he was sentenced in a Kent juvenile court at the age of 13. In August 2010, at the age of 17, he was found guilty of assaulting a girl, causing her to suffer a swollen eye. He received a 4-month detention and correction period as a result. 11 years after his initial offense, Jordan committed another crime against a woman, resulting in a 3-year ban from approaching her, either directly or indirectly. By 2010, he had a total of 28 convictions for 69 different offenses. These offenses included theft, assault on both police officers and the general public, motor vehicle theft, traffic infractions, committing crimes while out on bail, and shoplifting. Jordan used a social media platform to boast about his extensive collection of weapons and glorify a life of crime. He shared various photos and quotes, as well as fake images claiming the FBI was searching for him. After being imprisoned for crimes including criminal damage, racially aggravated harassment, and carrying a bladed weapon, Jordan was released on parole on June 17, 2022. One of the conditions of his parole was to regularly meet with his assigned parole officer. Following his release, Jordan resided in a van on St. Valentine Street, located in a 130-acre park in the Gun Hill area of London's Redbridge district, the largest green space in the region. Jordan broke all the rules of his parole and missed 2 scheduled meetings with his parole officer. As a result, the authorities decided not to show him any mercy. On June 22, 2022, the parole service started the process to send Jordan back to prison, but they didn't notify the police until 2 days later. On the morning of Saturday, June 25, 2022, police went to his mother's house to arrest him, only to find he was not there. In the early hours of June 26, 2022, a horrific crime occurred in Ilford. Zara was discovered on the sidewalk, displaying signs of abuse, with her belongings scattered around her. Her body showed evidence of severe injuries, her clothes were torn, and her eyes indicated a desperate struggle for survival. A passerby immediately recognized the gravity of the situation and began administering chest compressions and CPR in an attempt to save Zara's life. Despite the efforts of passers-by and emergency medical responders, Zara's injuries proved too severe. She fought for her life but ultimately passing away at 9:58 a.m. on Sunday. At approximately 11 a.m., security cameras in the park captured Jordan disposing of evidence, including his clothes, with an air of indifference and calmness. This behavior suggested that the act of violence was premeditated rather than random. The police swiftly responded and visited Zara's grandmother, asking her to identify her granddaughter from video footage taken at the bar. Upon confirmation of Zara's identity, the police informed her grandmother about the incident. Zara's uncle Qasim then contacted other family members, including Aunt Farah in Portugal, to break the news. Farah recalled receiving the distressing call on Saturday night, which prompted her to immediately travel to London. The family was deeply shocked and struggling to cope with the intense sadness of Zara's passing. Concurrently, detectives initiated an investigation in the area where Zara's body was found. They began by gathering footage from surveillance cameras to reconstruct the attacker's movements. The combination of video evidence and bloody fingerprints discovered near the crime scene enabled the identification of Jordan as the primary suspect. Utilizing a video surveillance system, the police tracked Jordan's location and obtained images of him. Inspector Dave dispatched an officer to Gun Hill to verify if anyone recognized Jordan. The operation yielded swift results, as Jordan was found sleeping in his van shortly thereafter. The authorities immediately arrested Jordan, who was found with blood-stained clothes and shoes that he was trying to dispose of. Despite lengthy interrogations, he refused to speak or reveal any information about himself. Meanwhile, new video footage emerged, allowing police to piece together the incident surrounding the crime. The incident led parole officer Justin Russell to criticize the handling of Jordan's case, highlighting a series of errors. Jordan has a criminal history dating back to the age of 16 and has been in prison several times, making him a subject at high risk of committing a crime. After being released from detention, he missed several scheduled supervision appointments. Authorities failed to take prompt action to return him to prison. Zara's family described the last few days as incredibly shocking, acknowledging that their loss was irreparable. However, in the face of such grief, they were touched by the warmth and kindness people have shown. The family faced a significant amount of work and needed to find the strength to cope. Aunt Farah took charge of communicating with the media and meeting with the police. Even though they were dealing with their own shock and grief, the family understood that taking control of the situation was crucial to protect Zara from possible accusations by some media outlets. A preliminary hearing for the Jordan case occurred on July 1, 2022. A subsequent hearing was scheduled for September 30, 2022, to prepare testimonies for the trial. However, the trial was postponed because Jordan did not appear on the scheduled day. On July 2, a memorial service was held for Zara, organized by her family. The service took place along the route Zara would have taken home, representing her final, unfinished journey. Many attendees wore white to symbolize a silent walk. Over 120 organizations that specialize in supporting women attended, showing solidarity in the fight against violence. These organizations collaborated with Zara Alina's family and publicly pushed for justice and accountability. They stressed that it's crucial to address violence against women and stopping perpetrators from committing such acts. During a preliminary hearing at East London Court in Walthamstow, crime scene investigator Nadia Persat testified. She stated that local police officers could have done more to locate Jordan before he attacked Zara. Persat believes the jury should investigate this matter further. On November 16, 2022, Jordan failed to appear at the hearing, despite being informed that his attendance was mandatory. As a result, a video call was arranged, during which he pleaded guilty. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow argued that Jordan would be unfit for bail, and Judge Chima Grave agreed. The judge postponed the verdict until December 14th of the same year. However, as that date approached, Jordan failed to appear in court. Despite his absence, Jordan was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 33 years for the murder of Zara Alina. Jordan and his representatives appealed the sentence, which was subsequently reduced to 33 years in prison. The judge took into account that Zara was unconscious at the time of her death and therefore did not experience any suffering, which was a key factor in the decision to reduce the sentence. For months after the incident, it was revealed that Jordan had a personal relationship with a 32-year-old woman who worked at the Belmarsh Correctional Facility in South London. The woman, who was not a direct employee of the prison services but worked at the facility, was arrested and investigated for suspected misconduct in a public office. Zara Alina's family still fondly remembers her with love and pride. Her aunt, Farah, continues to advocate against violence towards women and girls. In March 2023, Farah participated in a march organized by various groups to raise awareness about the issue. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Jane Hilton. Jane was a familiar face in El Dorado Hills, California. She wrote for the Foothill Times and often reported on local social events. Jane had 6 children, whom she loved dearly and often inspired through her daily poetry. After earning her real estate license, she married Archie Hilton in 1984, but the marriage fell apart in July 1985. Seeking help, Jane approached her former boss, Will McLean, who owned a large house in El Dorado Hills. Will's daughter, Maureen Klein, lived there with her boyfriend. Will's nephew, Ricky Davis, and his girlfriend, Connie Dahl, were also staying in another room in the house. On July 6, 1985, Will invited Jane and his youngest daughter, Autumn Anchor, to live in his house. Will's house was crowded and had a lot of people coming and going. However, Jane and Autumn's first night there would be their last. At 3:30 a.m., Ricky Davis, 20, and his girlfriend Connie Dahl, 19, returned from a party and found Autumn wandering around outside. Autumn said she had been attacked and feared her mother would be angry. The 3 of them then went inside, where they found traces of blood in the hallway. When they entered the first room, which belonged to Ricky's mother, Maureen, the air became quiet. On the bed, they found the bloody body of Jane Hilton. She had stopped breathing. Because Maureen and her boyfriend were away on a camping trip and were not home at the time, Ricky and Connie called 911. Paramedics and police arrived at the scene, but Jane was pronounced dead at the scene. She had been stabbed 29 times, beaten, and bitten on the shoulder. This senseless murder led investigators to begin questioning those closest to Jane. Archie Hilton, Jane's estranged husband, was at the top of the list of suspects. He was interviewed and provided a solid alibi, including DNA. Initially, Archie Hilton was the logical choice because their marriage was in trouble. However, he said that although they were having some difficulties, there was no sign that he and Jane were going to divorce. When Ricky Davis and Connie Dahl were interviewed, they both said that they came home early in the morning and found Autumn waiting outside. When they entered the house, they found the hallway carpet soaked in blood. The blood trail led them to the master bedroom, where they found Jane lying dead on the bloody mattress. The details and physical evidence in the case were scant, and the potential suspects all had alibis. The case gradually went cold. The cold case was reopened in 1999, and El Dorado County Sheriff's Department detectives Richard Strasser and Rick Fitzgerald were assigned to investigate. After a thorough review of the case file, they focused on a newspaper article about Connie Dahl, Ricky Davis's ex-girlfriend and Jane Hilton's roommate. In the article, Connie described the position of Jane's body when she was found, lying on the bed, as if someone had placed her in her usual sleeping position. However, this testimony contradicted Ricky Davis's earlier statement. Ricky had said on the recording that the body was found on the floor. But at the time, detectives thought they heard Ricky say that, but they weren't sure. Detectives questioned Connie for 3 hours. At first, she stuck to her story. But over the next 18 months, Connie was questioned 4 times. Each time, the detectives used techniques known to increase the likelihood of a false confession. They accused Connie of her role in the murder, and she was threatened with being charged with murder. As a result, Connie cooperated with the detectives, even though she had no actual role in the case. She was convicted of manslaughter and only served 1 year in prison. Detective Strasser and Fitzgerald lied to Connie, telling her that they would use DNA evidence to identify a suspect. In fact, no DNA evidence was collected or tested in this case. Instead, the investigators used crime scene photos and real events, such as the bite mark on Jane's shoulder, to provide information to Connie and guide her to recall events the way they wanted. Over the course of 4 interviews, Connie began to lose control and recall events from the case. However, this also allowed her to create a completely different story about the night of the murder, based on what she remembered and what investigators gave her. Connie Dahl gave conflicting accounts of Jane Hilton's murder. In one interview, she claimed that Autumn Anker was present at the crime scene and was shot. In another interview, she admitted that she may have bitten Jane's shoulder. Connie also claimed that the murder began with an argument between Ricky Davis and Jane, which stemmed from Ricky's desire for Autumn to join them at a party, which Jane refused. Despite changing her story to fit the facts, Connie could not recall the murder weapon or where it was hidden. However, she implicated her ex-boyfriend Ricky Davis in the case, making him the prime suspect. Following Connie's confession, detectives interviewed Ricky Davis and Autumn Anker. Both stuck to their original accounts of the case. The detectives attempted to deceive Ricky by telling him that Autumn had also implicated him in the murder, but he did not change his story. Autumn told the detectives that she had no reason to protect Ricky and would not be swayed by threats of charges. Despite using coercive interrogation techniques, the detectives were unable to get Ricky or Autumn to change their statements. Therefore, they used Connie's confession to arrest Ricky. Connie accepted a plea bargain, agreeing to testify against Ricky in exchange for a reduced sentence. At Ricky's first trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, leading to a retrial. However, at his second trial in 2005, the jury found him guilty. During the trial, Connie took the stand and testified against Ricky. She explained that she had wrestled with Jane and accidentally bit her shoulder. Connie then walked out, leaving Ricky alone with Jane. Once outside, she heard Jane screaming, pleading, and gagging as Ricky continued to assault her. Ricky was sentenced to 16 years in prison for second-degree murder, largely based on Connie's testimony. Connie, on the other hand, received a reduced sentence of manslaughter and a 1-year sentence in county jail. Unfortunately, she died of a drug overdose in 2014. Despite his conviction, Ricky maintained his innocence. In 2006, he contacted the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, for help in proving his innocence. NCIP, a nonprofit founded in 2001 by Kathleen Rodolphi and Linda Starr, provides DNA testing services to convicted prisoners who claim innocence. Ricky's case was reopened in 2006 after he contacted NCIP. NCIP and the El Dorado County District Attorney's Office worked together to retest DNA from the crime scene. The retesting included Hilton's nightgown and biological material found under her fingernails. The retesting uncovered a DNA profile from an unidentified male. This DNA was found on both Hilton's fingernails and nightgown, indicating that they came from the same source. The results cleared Ricky, Connie, and Anchor of any crimes. This also proved that Connie's testimony was false. The DNA test results also proved Archie Hilton innocent, but unfortunately, he had passed away by the time the results were released. The unidentified DNA profile was entered into the FBI's CODIS database, but no matches were found. While the new evidence supports Ricky's claim of innocence, there are still obstacles to overcome. NCIP successfully argued that if the DNA test results had been presented at Ricky's trial, the outcome might have been different. In California, the standard for overturning a conviction typically requires new evidence that clearly establishes innocence. This standard is extremely difficult to meet. An expert on false confessions, Richard Leo, reviewed the transcript of Connie Dahl's interview in 2015. He found that detectives used pressure techniques to force Connie to give a false confession that fit the detectives' preconceived ideas about Jane Hilton's murder. Then, in 2016, the Northern California Innocence Project, NCIP, helped sponsor Senate Bill 1134, which was intended to address these issues. The bill allows wrongfully convicted people like Ricky to prove that new evidence could convince a jury. It was passed in January 2017, after NCIP attorney Melissa O'Connell filed a motion for a new trial based on new DNA evidence. The bill was sponsored by former California State Senator Mark Leno and brings California standards in line with those of 43 other states. In 2019, Superior Court Judge Kenneth Malakian overturned Ricky's 2005 conviction and ordered a new trial. It was originally scheduled to begin in the fall of 2019, but due to the health of his defense attorney, the judge announced the trial would take place in April 2020. However, the trial date changed again. Advances in DNA testing helped Ricky become the first person in California and only the second person in the United States to be exonerated of a crime. A new DNA testing method called genetic genealogy helped achieve this result. Genetic genealogy is a new DNA testing method that involves taking DNA evidence from the crime scene and sending it to genetic companies. These companies then search genealogical databases to find a potential match. In February 2020, the DNA evidence matched a man. In February 2020, El Dorado County District Attorney Vern Pearson announced that a new suspect had been identified in the death of Jane Hilton. The man was identified through DNA evidence collected from the crime scene. Following his arrest, several residents who knew the man revealed his identity to the media. The man is known as Michael Green, a longtime resident of Roseville, California. Michael graduated from Oakmont High School in 1986. According to those who knew him, Michael was a nice and easygoing person. They even described him as very calm and cool. So, a former friend of Michael could not understand why he would commit such a brutal act in El Dorado Hills. Michael was 17 years old at the time of the crime. On the night of July 6, 1985, Jane Hilton's daughter Autumn met Michael and his two friends, Calvin and Stephen, at a park. Autumn then decided to go home to shower and said she would come back to see her friends. However, she went to another friend's house instead of going back to the park. However, that evening, Autumn returned to the park to meet the boys again. What happened next is only speculation. Investigators believe Michael took advantage of the moment to break into Jane's home and was discovered by her. In the struggle to escape, Michael may have attacked Jane in a frenzy. After the attack, Jane's body was discovered by Ricky, Connie, and Autumn when they returned home. Michael had no criminal record before or after the murder. Michael appeared to have lived a normal life until DNA linked him to the gruesome crime. Two other boys who were with Michael were sought shortly after his arrest. One boy, Calvin, had died some time ago. However, another boy, Stephen, was found and questioned the day after the arrest. Stephen is considered a witness, not a participant in the case. Michael was arrested on February 11, 2020. As Michael was a juvenile at the time of the murder, he made his first appearance in juvenile court on February 19, 2020. Michael was then transferred so that he could be tried as an adult. Michael waited 2.5 years before he was tried in court. On July 29, 2022, Michael pleaded no contest. This means that Michael waived his right to a jury trial, and he will face a charge of first-degree murder. He also waived his opportunity to object to the plea. His sentencing date was set for September 27, 2022, with Judge Suzanne Kingsbury presiding. During the sentencing hearing, Dr. Elizabeth Kaufman, a professor of educational psychology, was called to testify about adolescent development. Kaufman's research shows that adolescents have a variety of developmental needs, including emotional and cognitive development. In late adolescence, young people can distinguish between right and wrong, but their ability to control their emotions declines. To provide additional information, the defense called several witnesses from Michael's childhood who had maintained relationships with him into adulthood. When asked about their views of Michael after learning of his confession, all agreed that they were shocked he had committed the murder of Jane Hilton. Those who knew Michael described him as cheerful, well-liked, funny, and lovable, both before and after the murder. Michael's ex-wife, Karen Green, said Mike was not evil at all. After the witnesses finished testifying, each of Jane Hilton's children gave victim impact statements. All described the unforgivable loss Michael had caused their family. Heather Purvis McConnell, Jane Hilton's daughter, said, "The pain that will never go away will always haunt me." Ardith Brandon, Hilton's fourth child, said, "I loved my mother and I think Michael loved her too. I want to know how he would feel or what he would say to the person who stabbed your mother 29 times. What would you do if you got a call in the early morning to tell you your mother was dead?" Ardith recounted collecting her mother's belongings from the house where she was killed and ended with a powerful statement, "We will always have something in common, regret for the stupid decision you made 37 years ago." Hilton's son, Ian, echoed his sister's sentiments. He went on to explain the hardships the family faced and the constant nightmares they endured, especially after being wrongly blamed for her sister Autumn. As he finished, he broke down in tears and said, "All the words we say will never bring my mother back." Autumn was the last to speak. Her testimony showed real pain as she recounted what she had been through over the past 2 decades. She recounted the day 2 detectives came to her home, telling her they had found the people responsible for her mother's death. She was later accused of biting her mother and helping move her body from the floor to the bed. Autumn said that if she had not sought the help of a lawyer at the time, she doesn't know how far the investigators' intimidation tactics could have gone. Deputy District Attorney Jay Linden read a statement on behalf of the family. In the statement, he questioned Michael about why he killed Jane in such a brutal manner. "You hit her. She had multiple injuries around her head and face. You kicked her in the jaw. You bit her shoulder. Why did you do that?" Linden went on to read a statement expressing that Michael did not just kill Jane, he destroyed many lives in the process. Linden then asked Michael if he thought about Jane and who she was. He pointed out her accomplishments and the love she had for each of her children. In her closing argument, Michael's defense attorney, Margaret Husher, emphasized that Michael was not in control of his actions. Margaret argued that Michael did not realize that his actions were wrong because he was a teenager at the time. This argument was based on expert testimony from Dr. Kaufman. She asked the court to consider a reduced sentence, reading various criminal codes and court rules. However, Judge Kingsbury interjected and stated that the court would not consider granting Michael probation, leaving the defense unable to add any further comment. In response, Lyndon thanked the court and said that the request for probation was an insult. He said it was like a slap in the face to the victim's family, who had suffered for decades. Lyndon stated that Michael had gotten away with murder for 37 years and that granting him probation would allow him to get away with more. Judge Kingsbury has heard many arguments about juvenile murder cases. In her 26 years as a judge, she said the murder of Jane Hilton was the most brutal. Before sentencing, Kingsbury asked the victim's family to forgive them for the pain they have endured. She also hoped they would overcome their pain, as that was their mother's wish. Kingsbury encouraged Michael Green to use all the resources available to him in the California Department of Rehabilitation. She said Michael could achieve parole if he used those resources. Kingsbury also said Michael had a great side and that he had a lot to offer. She also said he was young enough to be released and live a productive life. Michael Green was sentenced to life in prison and is being held in the El Dorado County Jail. He will then be transferred to the California Department of Rehabilitation. Restitution will be determined after further review by the court. Ricky Davis, who was wrongfully convicted of the murder, was released on February 13, 2020. He will be entitled to more than $750,000 in state compensation. However, his attorney argues that this amount does not make up for the years of freedom he has lost. Ricky continues to sue the state for damages covering the period from May 21, 2002 to February 13, 2020, for a whopping $18 million. The lawsuit is still pending as of 2022. In September 2022, California passed Assembly Bill 2644, which prohibits law enforcement officers from using threats, physical harm, deception, or manipulative interrogation tactics when interrogating people 17 years of age or younger. District Attorney Vern Pearson is calling on all law enforcement agencies to stop using intimidation tactics. He says the deceptive tactics that have been used for years will assume guilt and focus on getting a confession instead of getting the whole story. The El Dorado County DA's office will now dismiss any case where the main evidence is a confession obtained through threats, lies, or psychologically manipulative interrogation tactics. The measures are intended to ensure that no one is convicted based on a false, coerced confession like the one that Ricky Davis made. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kristen Rossum. Ralph and Constance Rossum were dedicated parents to their 3 children, prioritizing their kids' development and well-being above all else. Their children were educated from a young age, attended good schools, and they encouraging their children to explore their interests through a variety of extracurricular activities. However, their daughter Kristen struggled to cope with the pressure of living up to family expectations. Feeling overwhelmed and desperate to escape, Kristen began to rebel by lying, skipping school, and finding ways to escape her temporary problems. At first, she felt more comfortable when she drank alcohol, but over time, the effects of alcohol stopped being effective for her. As a result, she turned to the controlled substance methamphetamine and eventually became dependent on it. Methamphetamine, commonly referred to as meth, is widely considered the most addictive illicit substance in the United States. Its use often leading to paranoia, impaired judgment, and euphoria. Kristen's parents noticed her erratic behavior and, in a conversation, discovered she'd been struggling with the substance since high school. Her entire family, who were highly educated, were shocked and deeply affected by this behavior. After months of conflict with her parents, 17-year-old Kristen secretly ran away. While vacationing in Mexico with friends, she met a tall, handsome man named Gregory de Villers, who was 7 years her senior. Over time, They fell in love with each other. He helped her get settled and get her health back. With Gregory's support, she turned her life around by getting a job at the local forensic service as a toxicology assistant. Her skills impressed the employer and her addiction was forgotten. As a forensic assistant, Kristen graduated from college with honors. Her teachers and employers praised her and gave her the Best Student Award without knowing the reason why she loved her chosen profession. After 5 years of dating Gregory, they had their grand wedding on June 5, 1999. Kristen's parents loved Gregory dearly and were relieved that their daughter had overcome the pain of her past and was now on the path toward a bright and fulfilling future. In March 2000, Kristen was hired by the San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office as a toxicologist, specializing in analyzing body fluids for narcotics. Gregory was working in the biotechnology industry at the time. But Kristen soon grew tired of her dull and monotonous life, and she began to look for excitement elsewhere. She met a new co-worker, Michael Robertson, who had just been appointed as the department head. Although Michael was married, they unexpectedly developed strong feelings for each other. They couldn't keep their relationship a secret for long. Gregory discovered many love letters between his wife and Michael. The marriage relationship was getting worse, yet Gregory remained hopeful that it could be salvaged. Understanding his wife's weakness, he made an effort to support and rescue her from her difficulties, hoping to mend their relationship. This time Kristen did not want to be saved. She asked for a divorce on Monday morning, November 6, 2000. Kristen was getting ready for work as usual. Gregory was sick and at home. Kristen was very tired worrying about her husband. In the days after their breakup talk, he was indifferent and unusually calm. Kristen informed Gregory's workplace that he was sick, and then she also visited her husband during her lunch break. Gregory fell asleep at 9:22 p.m. That same day, Kristen called the emergency services to report that her husband Gregory was not breathing. He had most likely committed suicide as he was home alone. Kristen was crying on the phone and she lost her temper, so she did not listen to the dispatcher's instructions about performing an autopsy and performing first aid on her husband. Police and paramedics arrived at the scene at 10:19 p.m. Gregory was pronounced dead. He was lying on the bedroom floor with his torso exposed, surrounded by scattered rose petals. An examination of the room revealed evidence suggesting that Gregory taking a fatal amount of multiple prescription medications. Empty painkiller bottles were scattered around the room, and torn wedding photos were found on his bed. When questioned, Kristen said she told Gregory she wanted to separate the night before, just over a year after their wedding. She felt regret about the marriage, thinking they rushed into it too quickly. Kristen also found Gregory too controlling and she wanted more space. Gregory's death was initially ruled a suicide, caused by a powerful sedative. Kristen signed the cremation papers, but Gregory's family and friends were skeptical. They had noticed no changes in his personality or mood, and they believed he would never use those fatal drugs. The family's doubts led them to try to stop the cremation and request an autopsy. Their persistence eventually led investigators to consider the possibility that Gregory's death was not a suicide, but a murder. An investigation into Gregory's death revealed the fentanyl, a painkiller 150 times more potent than morphine, along with smaller amounts of other substances including clonazepam and trace. Initially, the cause of death was suspected to be an overdose of oxycodone, often referred to as heroin, but further investigation pointed to fentanyl as the lethal dose. A substance can provide pain relief and produce a feeling of euphoria. However, it can also slow down breathing and be fatal if not treated in time. Because of the strong effects of clonazepam and other substances found in Gregory's body, investigators speculate that someone else intentionally gave him a fatal dose of fentanyl. Kristen became the prime suspect due to her extensive knowledge and access to powerful prescription medications like fentanyl. During questioning, Kristen's disheveled appearance and history of substance abuse raised suspicions about her potential involvement in Gregory's death. Her own testimony revealed inconsistencies on the day her husband died. Initially, Kristen told medical staff that he was not taking any medications, but later changed her statement to suggest that he may have taken oxycodone at the hospital. The change in her story, combined with her knowledge and access to powerful prescription drugs, supported the argument that Kristen was involved in her husband's death. On November 8, the police received a call from Russ Lowe, a coworker of Kristen's. Russ revealed that Kristen was having an affair with her boss. Further investigation uncovered evidence of Kristen's relationship with her boss, Michael. This evidence consisted of affectionate emails and computer documents. Notably, the documents also revealed Michael's knowledge of fentanyl, a substance that later became significant in the murder case. Kristen and Michael's relationship became a key aspect of the investigation. It is suspected that Gregory became a threat to Michael and Kristen because he knew that Kristen had access to the laboratory and that she had secretly used narcotics. Michael covered for Kristen, supporting her actions. During the investigation, Michael admitted to being aware of Kristen's drug addiction at the time. Although no charges were filed against Michael and Kristen, but they were both fired for violating several rules. Kristen's troubles started in January, when police searched her home for evidence of drug use. Initially, she was arrested but later released on bail. A new proof shed light on the investigation: Kristen's diary, uncovered during the initial examination. Kristen didn't write the diary for personal reflection, but rather as a way to present herself to others and maintain her innocence, while making her husband Gregory's death look like a perfect suicide. Notably, on the day of his death, Kristen bought a rose to pair with lingerie that suggested infidelity. A medical examination of Gregory's body revealed that he had been unconscious for at least 6 hours before his death. The estimated time of death was likely about an hour to an hour and a half before it was officially confirmed. Furthermore, bruises were found around the needle marks on his arm. During the investigation, a short supply of the lethal substance was discovered at Kristen's workplace, along with other narcotic substances. A suspicious vial of fentanyl was also found, leading police to suspect that Kristen had poisoned Gregory without his knowledge. Kristen was arrested on June 25, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After spending 6 months in custody, she was released on bail. The prosecution's main argument in her first trial centered around the motive for the murder. They claimed that Kristen killed Gregory to protect her reputation because he threatened to expose her drug addiction and her affair with Michael. The prosecution alleged that Kristen used a powerful synthetic opioid called fentanyl to poison Gregory. Fentanyl is 80 times more potent than morphine. It was suggested that Kristen initially attempted to kill Gregory with a different substance, clonazepam, but when this failed, she used fentanyl. To make it seem like Gregory had taken his own life, Kristen staged the scene by ripping out pages from her diary and placing personal items, including rose petals and a wedding photograph, around his body. As a biochemistry graduate, Kristen leveraged her knowledge of chemistry and drugs to orchestrate Gregory's death. The prosecution also claimed that Kristen deliberately withheld information about the fentanyl from her colleagues in the medical examiner's office, aiming to mislead them into believing Gregory's death was self-inflicted before his autopsy. The developments of what happened that day are reproduced as follows. On the morning of November 6th, she contacted Gregory's workplace to report his absence, then headed to her workplace. Her colleagues stated that around 9 a.m., she began her workday. However, they recalled finding her crying in their Michael's office about an hour later. The manager of the apartment building where Kristen and Gregory were staying witnessed Kristen returning home at 12:10 p.m. Shortly after, at 12:41 p.m., Kristen went to a nearby grocery store and bought various items. Among these purchases was a credit card statement. This confirmed her emergence at the store several hours before Gregory's death. Additionally, Kristen made multiple phone calls to Michael. The San Diego County Medical Examiner, Dr. Blackburn, who performed Gregory's autopsy, testified that Gregory had been deceased for at least an hour by the time paramedics arrived. The examiner also disclosed that Gregory was suffering from early-stage bronchopneumonia at the time of death. Breathing difficulties occur when lung secretions accumulate, often as a result of poor breathing. This can happen when a person is unconscious or taking very shallow breaths. Dr. Blackburn presented additional evidence, stating that Gregory's body contained a significant amount of urine in his bladder at the time of death. This accumulation would have caused severe discomfort if Gregory was conscious, suggesting he likely struggled to breathe for 6 to 12 hours before his death. Furthermore, Dr. Blackburn found it unlikely that Gregory, in an unconscious state, could have scattered rose petals on himself. During the trial, Dr. Blackburn also testified that the level of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not high enough to be considered an overdose, and therefore would not have been the cause of death. Dr. Theodore Stanley, testifying for the prosecution, stated that fentanyl, a powerful and fast-acting painkiller, can have severe side effects leading to respiratory arrest. The onset of its effects varies based on the administration method. The fastest method of maximal effect is intravenous administration, which occurs within about 5 minutes. Intramuscular injection results in maximum effect within 15 to 20 minutes. This is followed by oral administration, with maximum effect within 20 to 30 minutes. The slowest method of maximal effect is the transdermal patch, which takes about 16 hours. Dr. Theodore testified before the court that fentanyl is typically not taken orally because the liver breaks down approximately 65% of the substance. As a result, only 35% of fentanyl is able to enter the bloodstream. However, when questioned about how fentanyl was detected in Gregory's body, neither Dr. Blackburn nor Dr. Theodore was able to provide a clear explanation. Dr. Theodore found that the amounts of fentanyl in Gregory's body, combined with the fact that Gregory had been unconscious and breathing shallowly for hours before his death, suggested that the fentanyl may have been given to Gregory by someone else. During the trial, the prosecution had difficulty explaining to the jury exactly how Kristen poisoned her husband. However, there was evidence that she may have applied a fentanyl patch to Gregory's arm while he was sleeping. Kristen's former workplace provided a crucial piece of evidence, as 15 fentanyl patches were discovered missing from the lab. While Kristen maintained her innocence, her defense team accepted that fentanyl was the cause of Gregory's death, but they suggested an alternative explanation. According to the defense, Gregory intentionally gave himself a fatal dose due to feelings of desperation about family problems. In court, Kristen recounted her of events on the morning of November 6th. She recalled waking up to find Gregory in a state of distress. Gregory called his employer at 7:42 a.m. to report his illness and informed them that he would not be going to work. Kristen claimed she left for work, but returned to their apartment during her lunch break to check on Gregory. When she asked him why he was so upset, Gregory replied that he was feeling unwell due to taking oxycodone and clonazepam and planned to stay home and rest. Kristen returned to work after that and came home around 8 p.m. Upon arrival, she found Gregory in bed and assumed he was asleep. She went to take a shower, and when came out, she tried to wake him, but when she touched him she felt cold. Kristen then immediately called emergency services. During questioning, the prosecutor questioned the validity of Kristen's explanation. She admitted to lying in the past and lying about her drug use, which made her testimony seem suspect. Autopsy and toxicology results showed that Gregory had been unconscious for approximately 6 to 8 hours before his death, contradicting Kristen's initial claim that they had lunch together that day. The defense argued that the concentration of clonazepam in Gregory's blood was not fatal on its own. However, They acknowledged that the combined effects of oxycodone, an opiate, and clonazepam, a benzodiazepine, could be more potent than the effects of either substance alone. They suggested that Gregory may have accidentally taken the drugs, but they could not explain why the high concentration of fentanyl was found in his body, which remains unexplained. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kristen guilty of first-degree murder and special circumstance murder due to poisoning. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Kristen claimed innocence and appealed the verdict in the appellate court, where a critical mistake by her own defense team was discovered. Her lawyers had admitted that fentanyl caused the death but failed to test the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. This important test will help determine whether Gregory ingested fentanyl and whether the fentanyl in his body was due to contamination from laboratory testing rather than what he actually ate in. If fentanyl was only detected in the samples and not in Gregory's body, the prosecution's theory that fentanyl caused his death would be incorrect. The appeal also revealed a chain of custody violation regarding the samples. Although the samples were marked and placed in a cardboard box, the containers were not sealed. They were left at the medical examiner's office for approximately 36 hours before being shipped to the sheriff's forensic lab due to the recipient's absence. During this time, the samples were potentially accessible to anyone with a key to the medical examiner's office building, raising concerns that someone may have contaminated the samples. Kristen's appeal contends that any individual with a motive to falsify evidence could have added the substance to the sample. A panel of judges from the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals reviewed Kristen's case and concluded that her lawyers had made a serious error. The prosecution claimed Gregory died of a fentanyl overdose. Kristen's lawyers, however, did not contest that claim. Instead, they accepted the fentanyl overdose explanation. The judges did not overturn the verdict but sent the case back to the lower court to decide whether the defense's error could have changed the outcome of the trial. The U.S. Supreme Court has issued a ruling stating that federal courts must respect the decisions made by state courts in similar cases. This ruling impacts Kristen's case, as the court has voted against a hearing and her appeal was denied, leaving her in custody. Kristen's trial was not the only part of the case. She had a co-defendant named Michael. Although he was not in the U.S. for the trial, he is still a part of the case and risks being arrested if he returns. However, he may be eligible for a $100,000 bail. Michael has been living in Australia, where he works as a forensic toxicologist. Kristen Rossum was arrested in 2003 and received a life sentence without parole. Gregory's family is now suing the county for allowing Kristen to steal a lethal dose of the same drug without detection, and they blame the county's negligence for her crime. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jasmine Richardson. The Richardson family was widely admired for their friendly and hospitable personalities, which made everyone feel at home. Deborah, Mark, and their children, Tyler and Jasmine, lived in a cozy home. Their home is frequented by friends, and the family atmosphere is built on the principles of love and respect. However, things took a turn when Jasmine, their 12-year-old daughter, entered puberty. From a calm and obedient girl, she grew into a confident but also impulsive young woman. This new personality led to frequent conflicts with her parents, and her academic performance started to decline. Jasmine's interests changed in a big way. She switched from listening to modern pop music to heavy rock. In addition, her fashion style is no longer the same as before. Gone were the bright colors and cheerful clothing. Instead, she opted for a darker, more somber style that was often provocative. It was clear that Jasmine was trying to attract the attention of boys, and she began to accentuate the curves of her body. Her interaction with friends noticeably decreased as she began spending more time alone in her room, often with the door closed, glued to her computer screen. After the internet became available at home, her interests shifted to exploring Gothic themes, reading dark poetry, learning about criminal psychology, and studying human anatomy. She also became fascinated with criminal psychology and the Wiccan religion, referring to herself as a witch. She connected with like-minded individuals through websites focused on similar interests, forming a community of friends who shared her passions. Her social media page featured the greeting, "Welcome to my tragic world." Jasmine's behavior, initially thought to be a sign of puberty, but late became more concerning as she began to distance herself from her family. She created a fictional online persona, gave herself a different name, age, and began seeking relationships with people much older than her. Her parents tried their best to support her during this difficult period, suggesting that they spend time together by participating in common activities. However, Jasmine found these suggestions uninteresting. Her relationship with her younger brother deteriorated as she started speaking to him less frequently, viewing him as an annoyance. In stark contrast, she spends hours talking to strangers on social media, building other relationships, to make up for her lackluster relationships with family and friends. Deborah and Mark were aware that their daughter's new hobbies were likely a temporary phase of her youth. As a result, they were patient and allowed her to explore her interests. When Jasmine asked to attend a punk rock concert, her parents agreed. If only they had known the consequences that would follow this outing. In early 2006, Jasmine attended a local concert by a youth band that shared her interests. She also knew that Jeremy Steinke, a boy who had caught her attention for months, would be there. They had met online through a website for vampire enthusiasts and occasionally communicated with each other. Jeremy created an online persona as a 30-year-old werewolf who craved blood. To support this claim, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, but the origin of the fluid was unknown. Despite his ambiguity, he seems to believe he is unique, a quality Jasmine finds appealing and interesting. Jeremy and Jasmine connection deepened after meeting at a concert. Jeremy, however, was 23 years old, and the duo knew her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference. As a result, they decided to keep their romance a secret. Complications in Jeremy's life were made worse by problems he had experienced earlier. He struggled financially and resided in a trailer with his mother and sister. His relationship with his mother was strained, largely because of her heavy drinking. This often led to violent arguments with some of her hot-tempered partners, who often abused Jeremy in drunken fits. By the age of 13, Jeremy was struggling academically and had mental health issues due to a troubled home life. He became so overwhelmed that he tried to hang himself, but fortunately, someone intervened in time. He was later diagnosed with depression and hyperactivity. Due to the relentless bullying he faced at school, Jeremy decided to stop attending. As Jeremy navigated the dark period of his life, he developed a passion for the concept of live immortally and began exploring online forums, where like-minded people shared thoughts and ideas. His online profile was filled with morbid topics, including self-harm, pain, and violence. Unbeknownst to their families, Jeremy had started a dating relationship with Jasmine. Their friends were aware of the relationship, but they found it strange due to the large age gap. Everything remained a secret until Jasmine's parents, Deborah and Mark, discovered her excessive internet use and decided to monitor her online activity. What they found alarmed them. Jasmine was in contact with strangers, including Jeremy. He is someone with a suspicious online identity. His nickname, Soul Eater, and interests in dark themes raised concerns, leading Jasmine's parents to intervene and restrict her access to the computer. They were shocked to learn that Jasmine was in a dating relationship with Jeremy, making it clear to them that this relationship was not acceptable under any circumstances. Deborah and Mark took their daughter Jasmine to see a psychologist, hoping she would get the help she needed to escape her toxic relationship. The counseling sessions greatly improved their parent-child relationship, and Jasmine appeared to be returning to a normal life, claiming the past was behind her. She regained access to her computer. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a wrong decision and proved fatal for Jasmine's family. On the evening of Saturday, April 22, 2006, as the family prepared for bed, Deborah heard a noise in the basement and went to investigate. She initially thought the noise might be rats but discovered a person wearing a ski mask instead. The masked man stood opposite Deborah, and her first reaction was to scream. The stranger attempted to silence her by covering her mouth but was unsuccessful, prompting Deborah to scream even louder. The assailant then stabbed Deborah in the chest with a knife, twice. Mark, hearing his wife's desperate cries for help, rushed down to the basement. He was met with a horrific scene. His wife lay in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing nearby. Mark quickly responded by attacking the intruder. However, he was stabbed in the stomach and sustained additional stab wounds. As Mark's pain began to subside and he was losing consciousness, he quietly asked the attacker why he did that. The attacker coldly replied that it was because Mark's daughter had wanted it that way. Upstairs, Tyler was left alone and scared as the attacker approached. Tyler was still in his pajamas and was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps grew louder and the bedroom door opened. Just a few days before the murder, Jasmine was happy since her parents had forgiven her, allowing her to reconnect with them. Mobile phones weren't widely used at that time, so Jasmine used the computer to communicate with the outside world. As soon as she regained internet access, she immediately contacted Jeremy. She told Jeremy, "Everyone will think you and I are crazy, but there's one way we can be together, if my parents disappear." However, what Jasmine didn't reveal to her parents was that she was secretly forming a plan to kill them while she was receiving therapy sessions. She shared this plan with Jeremy. He found the idea appealing, but he stressed that everything needed to be carefully, meticulously planned and that attention to detail was required. Jasmine realized that as long as her parents were alive, she would never be able to be with Jeremy. During this time, Jasmine's friends noticed that she often complained about her parents, expressing her annoyance towards them. What they don't realize is that Jasmine's resentment eventually leads her to want to end her parents' lives. Despite her frequent comments about killing her parents, but her friends considered it just a funny joke. Garrett crossed the street to his friend Tyler's house on Saturday, April 22, in 2006. He was excited to play, as the weather was pleasant. When he arrived at the Tyler's house, he noticed that the blinds were still closed, which seemed unusual. Even more unusual was that no one came to the door when he knocked. This surprised Garrett, as the Mark's car was parked in the driveway. Curious and hoping to find someone, Garrett peeked through the living room window but didn't see anyone. He then walked to the back of the house, towards the basement area where he often played with Tyler. As he looked through the window, he saw something strange on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. This disturbing discovery prompted Garrett to inform his mother. Garrett's mother seemed suspicious at first but decided to check on Tyler's family. They approached the house together, and Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman peeked inside and was met with a horrific sight, immediately prompting her to call emergency services. "There's been an incident at the Jasmine's house," she reported. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and forcibly entered the house through the front door. They then proceeded to the basement. Due to the severity of their injuries and the large amount of blood, the police initially struggled to identify the bodies. However, despite the difficulties, they were eventually able to confirm that the victims were Mark and Deborah, and tragically, they had lost their lives. The crime scene was exceptionally horrific, with blood splatters covering the floor, walls, and ceiling. Later, during a thorough search of the house, the police found a young child in the upstairs bedroom. The boy was lying in bed, surrounded by toys also splattered with blood, and had visible knife wounds. A young boy's throat had been severely cut. As police searched the house, they realized that the Mark and Deborah's eldest daughter, Jasmine, was missing. This raised concerns for her safety. Initial investigations suggested that the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room, with the rest of the house appearing untouched. The condition of the boy's body indicated that the crime likely took place the previous night. It seemed that the perpetrator had broken into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. But what had happened to Jasmine, and where was she? The police developed several theories to explain her disappearance. One possibility was that she had managed to escape and was somewhere safe. Another possibility was that the perpetrator had taken her and was harming her. However, as the investigation continued, no clear answers emerged. Detectives turned to the media for assistance in locating the missing girl. Jasmine, hoping she would reach out or someone would come forward with valuable information. The investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives and friends of Mark's family and their colleagues to gather more detailed information about their lives. They sought to determine if the family had any enemies who could be capable of such a heinous act. However, upon further investigation, they learned that Mark's family was well loved and had no enemies. They were a loving family with a strong marriage and positive relationships with their children, except for one exception, their eldest daughter, Jasmine, who had been causing trouble lately. As a result, the media announcements shifted focus. The investigation now sought to locate the eldest daughter, Jasmine, a very suspicious person. The girl may have information about the case or might have been involved in it. Under Canadian law, which prohibits publishing the names of minors, so news outlets started referring to Jasmine Richardson as JR because she was underage at the time. After news of her relationship with Jeremy spread, this couple has become a wanted person by the police. The police initially focused on their friends and acquaintances. However, this line of investigation was ultimately unsuccessful, and the investigation reached a dead end. Police investigation revealed some new information. A few hours after the crime, Jasmine and Jeremy were seen at a restaurant and a party hosted by a friend. A friend noticed that Jasmine was fine, showing no signs of distress or trauma, and she continued to socialize, drink, and have fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed and replied in a light-hearted manner. Jeremy and she took care of them. However, Jeremy's tone took a darker turn when he nodded in agreement, and then he added that he had cut them up like fish, implying a violent act had occurred. Jasmine's laughter downplayed the severity of the situation, making it seem less significant. The party guests burst out laughing, thinking that the remark was a sick joke. However, they did not realize that it was actually true. The guests' amusement was also verified by a comedian who was present. The police found a detailed plan in Jasmine's school locker, revealing her intentions to harm her family members with the help of her boyfriend. The photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and it is likely that they will be caught soon, as someone is expected to come forward with information about their whereabouts. Eventually, police received a tip and found Jasmine and Jeremy in Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. They were found sleeping in a pickup truck and were taken into custody without a struggle. Jasmine and her boyfriend, Jeremy, were questioned individually, with Jasmine being interviewed first. She told investigators that she and Jeremy were deeply in love and that he reciprocated her feelings. However, their relationship was impacted by two main issues: a large age gap and disparate social status. Jasmine claimed that her parents would never have approved of their relationship. According to Jasmine, Jeremy ended the lives of her parents so that they could be together. When detectives inquired about her involvement in the crime, Jasmine denied being present at the time it occurred and stated she had no prior knowledge of the event. After she found out what had happened, she decided to run away with him because her love for Jeremy was so great. Detectives needed to identify the mastermind behind the plot. To get the suspect to cooperate, investigators came up with a clever tactic. They placed an undercover informant in Jeremy's cell, who successfully extracted information from him that contradicted Jasmine's claims. According to Jeremy, the plan to kill Jasmine's parents was actually she's idea. Jeremy was initially hesitant about going along with the plan. However, after realizing his own feelings for Jasmine, he agreed to it. Additionally, Jasmine's parents confiscating her computer as punishment also influenced his decision. Jeremy confessed to the informant. He took care of she parents, Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine took care of her younger brother, Tyler. Jeremy reveals that she desperately begged him to spare Tyler and come to her, and he was happy to get revenge on them all. Following Jeremy's confession, investigators questioned Jasmine using the recorded conversation between them and he as evidence, which left her no choice but to reveal every detail of the crime. She admitted that she stabbed her younger brother, Tyler, stating she didn't want to leave him behind as an orphan. In the following investigation, Jasmine and Jeremy voluntarily shared their social media profiles and passwords. By doing this, investigators were able to look at their private conversations and found thousands of messages that backed up Jeremy's previous claims. It became clear that Jasmine was indeed the mastermind behind the plan. Further investigation also uncovered a disturbing dynamic between Jasmine and Jeremy. Jeremy wrote that Jasmine was the only person who accepted and supported his unusual tastes, helping to alleviate the feelings of isolation he experienced due to not fitting in with societal norms. Fearing that he would lose her, he agreed to help carry out the horrific plan. One of Jeremy's messages contained a chilling passage, exposing his desire for violence. Jeremy wrote that he wanted revenge on Jasmine's parents and was determined to hold them accountable. His intention was to harm them and eventually make them disappear. Jeremy showed his affection for Jasmine in her time of need. However, his friends revealed a disturbing fact. Hours before the incident, Jeremy and his girlfriend had watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers. This movie tells the story of a couple who brutally murder 9 people. Jeremy's friends stated that after watching the film, he expressed a desire to reenact a similar scenario with his girlfriend, calling it the best love story of all time. Based on the evidence collected, including witness testimony and the suspect's confessions, Jasmine and Jeremy, detectives were able to reconstruct incidents surrounding the crime. This led to the suspects being charged with 3 homicide counts. Jeremy was intoxicated before the incident. Jasmine allowed him into the house and led him to the basement, where he assaulted Deborah, Jasmine's mother. Deborah received 12 stab wounds, with the most severe wound penetrating 12 centimeters into her chest and damaging her heart, which ultimately caused her death. Jeremy then brutally attacked Mark, Jasmine's father, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were on his back. Mark also bled to death on the basement floor. Meanwhile, upstairs Jasmine stabbed her younger brother Tyler 5 times. Then, Jeremy joined her. He coldly slit the boy's throat. Jeremy returned home to clean the blood off himself, while Jasmine took a taxi to a restaurant where they had agreed to meet. Once reunited, they discussed the incident of the night and then went to a party. Jeremy's friend, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and evade authorities by fleeing to Saskatchewan. The brutality and gruesomeness of their actions are difficult to put into words. Jeremy and Jasmine committed their heinous crimes with ease and without emotion. What is even more disturbing is that during interrogation and detention, neither of them expressed any regret or remorse for their actions. While they were detained, Jeremy and Jasmine wrote letters to each other, referring to themselves as legendary and immortal. In one of these letters, Jeremy submitted a marriage proposal to Jasmine, and she happily accepted. Jasmine and Jeremy's intense relationship fell apart suddenly. As trial began, they blamed each other for their actions. Jasmine was the first to face trial in June 2007. She entered a not guilty plea, claiming that she was in a trance-like state at the time, which left her unable to intervene or stop Jeremy from killing her family. Jasmine also asserted that she only injured her younger brother, and Jeremy was the one who caused her younger brother's death. She made a statement that her conversations with Jeremy about killing her parents were just hypothetical discussions. But Jeremy took them seriously and pressured her into making them a reality. Jasmine received a 10 years prison sentence for 3 counts of homicide. However, due to Canadian laws regarding juvenile offenders, this was the maximum sentence she could receive as she was under 14 years old at the time of the crime. The primary goal of the sentence was to focus on healing and restoring the girl's mental well-being rather than punishing her. In a 10-prison sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility. During her stay, doctors diagnosed her with 2 conditions: conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. Jasmine showed genuine remorse for her actions in the years leading up to her release, which was noted by medical professionals during her community supervision. After serving her full sentence, Jasmine was released from prison in 2016 and has since been living in Canada under a new, protected identity. Her return to society has been met with mixed opinions, with some people supporting her right to a second chance, while others believe her punishment should have been more severe. The community in Medicine Hat has made it clear they do not want her to return. It remains to be seen whether Jasmine has truly changed and grown during her time in detention. Jeremy's trial began in 2008. He claimed that he had not initially intended to harm his girlfriend's parents, Deborah and Mark. However, after being discovered in a basement, he felt forced to attack. Jeremy denied harming Tyler and instead suggested that Jasmine was the one responsible. His defense argued that Jasmine had deliberately manipulated him into committing the crime, as she sought to escape her parents' strict control. Friends of Jeremy stated that he came to them before the crime. He confided in them his fear of losing Jasmine, to the point where he was willing to do anything to prevent it. Jeremy's lawyers asked the court to reduce the charges to manslaughter, suggesting that he was under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. When questioned by the prosecution about his motives, Jeremy gave an inconsistent response. He stated that when someone finds their soulmate, they will do whatever it takes to keep them. Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained largely unemotional, but broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, testified in his defense. Jacqueline felt guilty about the role she played in his upbringing, during which he was frequently physically and emotionally abused by her partners. In the end, Jeremy was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree homicide and received 3 life sentences. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years, starting in 2033. Casey Lancaster's charges related to being an accomplice in a crime have been dismissed in a Medicine Hat court. However, she was found guilty of obstructing justice. As a result, she received a 1-year sentence of house arrest and was prohibited from using drugs and alcohol during her custody. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of William Lewis Reese. William Lewis Reese was born in Oklahoma on July 1, 1959, the youngest of 13 children in his family. He grew up in Yukon and Anadarko. Due to his family's financial struggles, he had to drop out of school in the 9th grade to work as a farm laborer. He married Judy Flaming in 1979 after she became pregnant. After getting married, William joined the Oklahoma National Guard but eventually left. During this time, his marriage began to unravel, and Judy divorced him after just 1 year. However, William convinced Judy to remarry him, and they had another child together. Unfortunately, their marriage problems persisted, and heavy drinking led to physical abuse against Judy, ultimately causing their marriage to end again. Judy filed a complaint against her husband in 1982 after he physically abused her, claiming that he also threatened her life with a knife and a shotgun. As a result, Judy divorced him for the second time. William later remarried to another woman. However, this marriage was also short-lived, as his second wife divorced him just a few months later. And William's string of crimes resumed shortly after. In April 1986, William kidnapped a 19-year-old woman who was the daughter of a Texas sheriff's deputy. The woman's car broke down on her way to the gym. And William, who worked as a truck driver at that time, approached her and offered assistance by promising to take her to the nearest payphone in his truck. Once inside the vehicle, he restrained her and committed a sexual assault. He then drove her to a nearby motel where he reserved a room for the night. When Williams gave her permission to use the bathroom, she took advantage of the chance to break free and phone the police. He then was arrested, charged, and then released after posting bail. However, a month later, while still awaiting trial, he committed another sexual assault, resulting in a second arrest. Williams stood trial for both crimes, was found guilty, and received the 25 years prison sentence. However, upon reviewing his case, an appeals court found that there were procedural errors in the original trial. As a result, his sentence was significantly shortened and ultimately led to his parole in October 1996. William moved into his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma, after serving 9.5 years. He regained his driver's license in early 1997 and then relocated to Houston, Texas. Shortly after, on May 16, 1997, he attempted to abduct and sexually assault Sandra Sapah, a 19-year-old. When Sandra stopped at a gas station in Webster, Texas, to use a payphone. After the call, she returned to her car and began driving but soon had a flat tire, forcing her to stop again. As she stood there, unsure of what to do next, William stopped the car behind her and offered to help. Sandra accepted his offer and got into the truck. However, William's intentions were sinister, and he overpowered her. Binding her wrists, then he continuing to drive on Interstate 45. Panicking, Sandra discovered that the door was unlocked. Despite being pregnant and fear for her life, Sandra made an attempt to escape by breaking free from the restraints and jumping out. Unfortunately, William caught hold of her and dragged her several miles along the pavement, causing severe injuries. Eventually, Sandra managed to break free and was taken to a nearby hospital. The police were notified, and she provided a description of her attacker. However, due to her traumatic state, she was unable to recall crucial details about the incident. To catch the predator, detectives needed more information. Months after the attack, they decided to use hypnosis on Sandra to see if she could remember anything else. Under hypnosis, Sandra recalled crucial details, including the license plate number of the truck that was involved in the crime. The detectives discovered a lead when they tracked down the owner of the vehicle with the matching license plate number. William was convicted of aggravated kidnapping and sentenced to 60 years in prison in 1998. While he was serving his sentence, detectives began to suspect that he might be linked to other crimes. Unraveling these secrets took years, leaving several families without answers. On a rainy April 3, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither asked her mother for permission to go jogging by herself at 9 a.m. Her mother agreed, not knowing that this ordinary decision would change her life forever. Laura Smither is the daughter of Bob and Gay Smither. She grew up in Friendswood, along with her younger brother. From an early age, Laura demonstrated a kind and gentle nature. She excelled academically and showed great talent in ballet. After being accepted into the prestigious Houston Ballet Academy, her goal of becoming a professional ballerina became a reality just days before this tragic incident. Laura's mother was surprised when she asked to go jogging that day, as she rarely ventured out alone. Homeschooled by her parents, Laura didn't even attend school. However, her desire to improve her dance skills had recently inspired her to take up cardio exercises, such as jogging. She had planned to go for a short run while making breakfast, and her mother agreed, she unaware of the danger lurking nearby. When Laura failed to return after a few hours, her parents began to worry. Normally, Laura was under close supervision and never went out alone for long. Her father, Bob Smither, searched the neighborhood but found no sign of her. He figured his daughter wouldn't be out for long, but she later didn't come back. Laura's parents reached out to relatives and friends to see if anyone had any information about her whereabouts, but no one had seen her. And they contacted the police to file a missing persons report. According to Bob, Laura went jogging this morning and it took longer than he expected. As police began their investigation, locals joined Laura's family to assist in the search. With photos of Laura in hand, her family and neighbors went door to door, asking if anyone had any information. The next morning, the police resumed their search, on foot combing through the nearby woods and helicopters scouring the area from above. Despite the initial lack of leads, the community's determination never wavered. Hundreds of volunteers joined the cause, and the eventually swelling to 6,000 volunteers for a week. Meanwhile, law enforcement agencies worked diligently to locate Laura. The National Coast Guard and the FBI also joined forces with the local police department to aid in the extensive search operation. Initial theories suggested that Laura may have become lost in the woods, but after that, the investigation went in one direction, now focus on the possibility of criminal behavior. On Sunday, April 20, 1997, a gathering at Friendswood High School was taking place to discuss the next steps in finding Laura. During this meeting, the police chief's expression became anxious after receiving the phone call, leaving those present there wondering what made him react like that. That evening at 10 p.m., Laura's parents received devastating news. A man walking his dog near a retention pond in Pasadena, about 12 miles from where Laura went missing, stumbled upon a badly decomposing body of a young girl. The girl was wearing only a pair of socks and was found in a muddy area. The police immediately suspected that the body was Laura's, and this was later confirmed through an autopsy. Everyone was devastated by the sudden and tragic loss of Laura. In addition to their grief, fear gripped the neighborhood, with many worried that a predator was on the loose and could target another child. To address these concerns and prevent further harm, the police opened an investigation, but initially they had no information about the perpetrator. To gather more information, the police started interviewing sex offenders in the area. They began to focus on William Reese, a 38-year-old equipment operator, was working at Windsor Estate in Friendswood at the time. On the day of Laura's disappearance, William left the workplace around the time she went missing and returned 30 minutes later, it raising suspicions about his activities during that short period. Police conducted an in-depth investigation but were unable to find any evidence shows that William is involved in this crime. As a result, the case went unsolved for years, leaving many questions unanswered. 19 years later, another mysterious disappearance happened to Kelly Cox, 20 years old. Kelly, a criminology student at the University of North Texas. In Denton on July 15, 1997, She and her classmates took a field trip to a local prison in Denton for a criminology class. She left her car in the parking lot across from the police station and had hidden a spare key in a magnetic box underneath her car. She then locked her belongings, including her cell phone, inside the car as instructed by her professor. After completing the jail tour at noon, Kelly rushed to her car to go to the university to take a test. However, when she tried to use the spare key to open her car door, it did not work, despite she checking it the night before. Since Kelly's phone was locked in her car, so she went to a nearby gas station and used a payphone to call her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris III, for help. She then purchased a drink inside the gas station. But from that point on, Kelly was never seen alive again. After about 45 minutes, Lawrence arrived at the meeting place, but when he got there, her car was still in the parking lot, yet Kelly herself was nowhere to be found. Neither the key box nor the key were present at the scene. He spent some time searching for Kelly, and when he couldn't find her, he decided to call her mother to see if she had returned home safely. However, Kelly's mother informed him that she hadn't arrived. Despite the initial suspicion surrounding Kelly's disappearance, but her family chose to wait a little longer to see if she would come back. It wasn't until 5:30 p.m. that same day when Kelly failed to pick up her 19-month-old daughter, Alexis, from her babysitter, that her family became certain that something was amiss. Kelly's family knew that she was a responsible mother, and it was entirely out of character for her to neglect her daughter like that. When Kelly was reported missing, the police immediately started searching for her. In keeping with standard procedure in missing persons cases, the police started by scrutinizing people close to Kelly. Initially, they focused on Kelly's boyfriend Lawrence, but after he passed 4 polygraph tests, he was cleared as a suspect. The case made progress when information led them to another potential suspect, William Reese, who had been under investigation in the Laura Smithers case. William, a sex offender, was considered a top suspect in Kelly's disappearance because a gas station receipt placed him in the Denton area on the same day Kelly vanished, even though he didn't live there at the time. The police searched his car for Kelly's fingerprints but did not find any. Without any leads, witnesses, or surveillance footage, the case stalled and went unsolved for many years. Kelly's disappearance was extremely difficult for her mother and stepfather, who had to raise Alexis on their own. As the years went by, Kelly never returned, but her daughter followed in her mother's footsteps, attending the same university. Alexis held on to the hope that her mother would come back one day. Kelly's family never lost hope of her return, continued to share her story, and kept her picture visible. Unfortunately, their wish never came true, and Kelly never made it back home. On the morning of August 17, 1997, Jessica Kane, a 17-year-old high school student, failed to return home after attending a theater party the night before. Jessica was born on August 28, 1979. She is known for her vibrant personality, creativity, and passion for sports. While studying at O'Connell High School in Galveston, Texas, she did well academically and served as captain of the school's coaching team. After focusing on her drama career and participating in numerous plays, Jessica attended a musical review in Dickinson on August 16, 1997. Following the event, she joined her friends at a cast party at Bennigan's on Bay Avenue Boulevard. However, Jessica did not return home that night, worrying her mother, who woke her father and called her. They reached out to several friends who had attended the party with Jessica, and all of them reported that she had left around 1:30 a.m. Jessica's parents immediately sensed that something was wrong and began searching for her. Upon investigating, Jessica's father found her vehicle parked near the Lamarck exit, close to the freeway, with her valuables still intact. He later quickly reported his to the police. As police began their investigation, hundreds of volunteers joined in the search for Jessica. During this challenging time, Jessica's parents met Bob and Gay Smither, a couple who had also lost their daughter, Laura Smither. Jessica's family and the Smithers family are going through their own grief. The Smithers family has tried to support Jessica's parents in their search for her. Despite the best efforts of police and volunteers, no sign of Jessica has been found. As a result, police are beginning to consider foul play and believe the chances of Jessica being found alive are extremely low. The case eventually went cold, but Jessica's family never gave up searching for their daughter. In a separate incident, on July 26, 1997, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnson's car was found abandoned at a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. But she disappeared without a trace. Tiffany was born on April 6, 1978, to Michael and Kathy Dober. She was the youngest daughter, extremely close to her family, especially her mother. Tiffany was a lively and optimistic young woman who grew up in a small town, with a passion for plants and gardening that she inherited from her grandfather. After graduating from high school in 1996, she married Ryan Johnson in 1997 and moved to Bethany, Oklahoma, where she took on 2 jobs to save money for college. Her dream was to attend Oklahoma State University to pursue a degree in botany. But unfortunately, that goal was never realized. On July 26, 1997, Tiffany finished her part-time shift at a restaurant around 2 p.m. She later headed home to get ready for a night out with her husband, Ryan, to celebrate their 3-month anniversary. Tiffany was supposed to meet Ryan at 11 p.m., but before that, she stopped at the Sunshine Car Wash to wash her white neon Dodge. Tragically, she was never seen again. When Ryan went looking for her that night, he couldn't find her at home and found no signs of her whereabouts. A police officer from the Bethany Police Department discovered Tiffany's abandoned white Dodge Neon at a car wash around midnight. The car's key was still in the ignition, and the door was open. The officer found Tiffany's purse inside the vehicle and a phone number for her mother, Kathy, in the glove box. However, when contacted, Kathy had no information about her daughter's whereabouts. The investigators then reached out to Tiffany's husband, Ryan, who also claimed to be unaware of his wife's location. This raised concerns, and it became apparent that something was amiss. The next day, July 27, 1997, near I-40 and Gregory Road, searchers found the body of a young Caucasian woman. When the police arrived at the scene, they suspected the body might be Tiffany's. The suspicion was confirmed when her husband Ryan identified the body from the pictures. Tiffany's body was found with only a swimsuit on, as all other clothing had been removed. The autopsy results revealed that Tiffany was sexually assaulted and strangled to death, although the exact time of her death could not be confirmed. Authorities collected unknown DNA from her body as evidence. With no leads on a suspect, investigators initially focused on Ryan, Tiffany's husband. However, they soon discovered that Tiffany was last seen at the car wash at 6 p.m., and Ryan had a solid alibi, having been at work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. A new lead emerged when the car wash owner contacted investigators, reporting that he saw a customer on the same day Tiffany disappeared. The customer was a man named William Reese, who had been featured in a news report a few months earlier for his involvement in an abduction in Texas. What's more noteworthy is that William has a personal relationship with Tiffany. His mother was good friends with Tiffany's mother, although he himself had never met Tiffany. After her death, he even called Tiffany's mother to offer his condolences. Despite this new information, police were still unable to gather enough evidence to prove William's involvement in Tiffany's murder, and the case remained unsolved for a long time. In 2015, thanks to advancements in DNA technology, investigators found new evidence in the Tiffany case. A DNA swab taken during Tiffany's autopsy in 1997 was sent to the lab for testing. The results matched a DNA profile in the CODIS database, which implicated William in Tiffany's murder. He was subsequently charged in Oklahoma City with the 1997 kidnapping and murder of Tiffany. Just as his trial was about to begin, William unexpectedly started confessing to other crimes in an attempt to reach a deal with the prosecution. Despite having eluded police for 19 years, he ultimately revealed the truth, having a history of aggravated kidnapping and other crimes. When shown photos of Laura Smither, Jessica, and Kelly Cox, he immediately accepted responsibility for their murders and disappearances, although denying any sexual motive behind his actions. William was questioned about his victims in Oklahoma. He agreed to cooperate with authorities by showing them the burial sites of two victims, Jessica and Kelly, on one condition: he would not face the death penalty. In April 2016, investigators followed him to a location in a Houston pasture where human remains were discovered. After several days of excavation, the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office confirmed that the remains belonged to Jessica. The search continued in Brazoria County, where another set of human remains was found. Dental records confirmed that these remains belonged to Kelly Cox. The trial for the murder of another victim, Tiffany, began in May 2021. William was found guilty by a jury on May 28, 2021, and received a death sentence on August 19, 2021, for her abduction and murder. After his murder conviction in Oklahoma, he was sent to Texas in March 2022 to face trial for the murders of Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, and Jessica. He pleaded guilty to all three charges and received a life imprisonment sentence in June 2022. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Nancy Lagerquist. Nancy Lagerquist, an 87-year-old woman, was a resident at the Riverside Healthcare Center, where she had lived since 1988. She was born in 1902 in Hamilton, Montana, and she spent much of her life working as an executive secretary. She was also an active member of the Missoula Business and Professional Women's Club before her retirement. She remained single for her entire life and did not have any children. When she passed away, she also did not have many relatives. On July 1, 1990, Nancy was seen sleeping in her bed by a care worker at 3:30 a.m. 1 hour later, at 4:30 a.m., the care worker checked on her room again but found her missing. This caused alarm and prompted 5 staff members on the shift to conduct a search. Despite their efforts, Nancy was nowhere to be found. At 4:41 a.m., the police were notified about her disappearance. It is worth noting that Nancy required around-the-clock assistance as she was unable to walk. Before her disappearance, she had been living an ordinary life at the care home, with nothing in her background suggesting she was at risk. Law enforcement and search and rescue teams arrived quickly at the scene. They searched the home and the surrounding area thoroughly. Since the home was located along the Clark Fork River, police officers in boats also searched the water. At 6:30 a.m., they stopped searching. Authorities found Nancy's body near the riverbank, about 30 minutes downstream from Riverside. She was the victim of a brutal murder involving sexual assault. Afterward, her body was thrown into the water. 2 investigators working on the case quickly realized the enormity of the challenge ahead. The discovery of Nancy's body in the water resulted in the destruction of any forensic evidence. Additionally, several key pieces of evidence, including Nancy's missing diaper and the possible murder weapon, were never found, leaving the police with unanswered questions. Detectives theorized that the perpetrator entered and exited Nancy's room through the window facing the river. To do this, they cut the window screen, but left no evidence on the windowsill, or anywhere else in the room. It is also puzzling that none of the home's alarm systems were triggered during the entry, and further checks revealed that all alarms were working properly at the time. A key witness reported seeing a man near the crime scene around 4 a.m. He walked through the parking lot of the Missoula Athletic Club, moving away from the river toward East Broadway Street. This individual was approximately 30 to 40 years old, 180 to 200 pounds, and had distinct physical features, including light brown collar-length hair, a mustache, and brown-rimmed glasses. He wore an untucked, striped white and brown t-shirt, which was longer at the back, along with tan shorts and white tennis shoes. The man was not considered a suspect in the case, but the police did want to question him. Nancy had very few relatives, so investigators quickly dismissed a family-related motive for the murder. They shifted their focus to the care home staff. Considering that a staff member would be familiar with the layout and security measures of the facility, leading them to suspect that the murder could be an inside job. This led authorities to concentrate on a particular male staff member. He was eventually cleared, but he left the care home less than a month later for unclear reasons. The police investigation shifted from focusing on a staff member to the possibility of an outside perpetrator. They observed that the home's security measures concentrated on the doors rather than the windows, leading them to speculate that the victim, Nancy, might have been targeted simply because her room faced the river, with no specific motive for the attack. During the investigation, a man named James Bailey was interviewed multiple times, but was eventually cleared as a suspect. Detectives have been reviewing witness statements to look for any other suspicious deaths at the nursing home. Their attention was drawn to the case of 86-year-old Bertha Scott, an Alzheimer's patient who passed away in her bed on May 2, 1990. At the time, her death was attributed to natural causes, as she had heart disease and was frequently restrained at night to prevent her from wandering. However, one nurse reported an unusual detail, a bruise on Bertha's neck, which they found suspicious. Bertha died and was buried without an autopsy being performed. Around the time of her death, staff members at her care home noticed some minor tampering with the windows in the physical therapy room. Based on a nurse's comments, the police decided to exhume Bertha's body to re-examine her cause of death. The police later revealed to her family that she had been raped, then she being strangled to death, leaving them in shock. Bertha's life is very different from Nancy's. Born in Pennsylvania in 1904, and Bertha married 20 years later. 2 years before her death, she moved to Missoula to be closer to her children. Although 4 of her 6 children had passed away before her, she left behind numerous grandchildren. During the medical examination of Bertha's body, semen was found, and the sample was collected. Unfortunately, the sample was too degraded to produce a DNA profile, therefore was unable to help the police identify her killer. Both cases eventually came to a dead end. In 1992, authorities investigated a suspect who was guilty of sexually assaulting a nursing home resident, but he had an alibi since he was in prison during the murders. The same year, Lloyd Chase Allen was also identified as a suspect, but he too was incarcerated at the time. In 2002, the Missoulian reported that several residents of the care home described a mysterious man who would walk the halls at night. There are concerns about the accuracy of the information provided by these residents, so it's difficult to determine whether this man actually existed. As a result, it is that additional unsolved cases exist. Without DNA evidence or further investigation, a resolution to this case seems unlikely. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Sarah Stops Pretty Places. Sarah Stops Pretty Places was born on August 14, 2001. She grew up in a large family and was a member of the Crow and North Cheyenne Native American reservations in Montana. As a teenager, she was an exceptional athlete, enjoying various sports including basketball, football, running, cross-country, and wrestling. She also had a passion for the arts, performing in plays and singing in her high school choir at Hardin High School. Sarah is a kind and compassionate person, always caring and understanding to those she comes into contact with. In her free time, she often cared for stray animals. Her lifelong dream was to become a performer, aspiring to act and sing, with a bright future ahead of her. However, her life was tragically cut short shortly after she turned 18. Sarah was last seen in the rural town of Hardin, near the Crow Reservation, on August 24, 2019. She lives with her grandmother, who is named Yolanda Frazier. People did not know where she went, but it was clear that she did not return home. Sarah planned to meet her mother the following day for a trip to North Dakota but failed to appear. Her family began to worry when Sarah no responding to texts, didn't answer calls, and was inactive on social media. This was unusual for her, raising concerns that something was amiss. Sarah's aunt, Priscilla Bulltail, went to the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office to report Sarah's niece missing. However, the office told her that she would have to wait a while before filing a report. This information proved to be false. In Montana, because Sarah was under 21 and considered a minor, police were required to conduct an immediate search. Despite this, it wasn't until August 27 that the missing persons report was finally allowed to be filed by Sarah's family. Sarah's family felt that the police did not take her disappearance seriously, they failing to conduct a search and failing to distribute flyers after she went missing. When she went missing, police initially told Priscilla that Sarah was probably just out with friends. Sarah had previously struggled with alcohol issues, most notably when she was found unresponsive at school in 2019 due to intoxication and required emergency medical help. After her disappearance, her family waited anxiously for any information about her whereabouts. It wasn't until 5 days later, on August 29, that a jogger stumbled upon Sarah's body near a wood pile in a backyard at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Rangeview Drive in the Hardin suburb, the same area where she was last seen alive. Notably, the homeowner, who had no connection to Sarah, was away at the time of the discovery. Sarah's family was not immediately notified that a body had been found, and instead, they learned about the information through social media rumors. As the news spread, they became extremely concerned. Priscilla attempted to visit the scene to identify the body, but was denied access and she couldn't tell if it was Sarah or not. Local news outlets were also not alerted to the discovery of the body. Sarah's mother and Yolanda visited the local mortuary on September 1 to identify a body, but they were initially told it was not Sarah's. As a result, the family continued their search for her. It wasn't until 10 days later that the body was confirmed to be Sarah's. The coroner concluded that she died on August 26 and that her death was suspicious, requiring further investigation. However, due to the advanced decomposition of her remains, the exact cause of her death could not be determined. It was also not possible to rule out asphyxiation as a cause of death. Following Sarah's body discovery, her family urged law enforcement to investigate her death. However, the family soon encountered resistance from Terry Bullis, the county coroner and owned the local funeral home Bullis Mortuary. Terry informed Sarah's mother, Geraldine, on September 12 that her daughter's remains would have to be cremated in order for them to be returned to the family. This went against the family's cultural beliefs and also meant that no further examinations of the body would be possible. Moreover, the family had chosen the Dahl Funeral Home to handle the funeral arrangements, but Terry forced them to use his business, Bullis Mortuary Funeral Home. To the family's dismay, Sarah was cremated before her other relatives could even arrive in Hardin. On September 14, the family located the site where Sarah's body was discovered with the help of nearby relatives. A few days earlier, They had tried to visit the area, but were unable to, as the scene was no longer cordoned off and there were no boundaries to where the body was discovered. They met Jason Cummings, the neighbor who had found Kaysira's body. He told them that he had suggested to the police to charge her phone so they could contact the family. Unfortunately, it seemed the police had ignored his suggestion. Jason also questioned the authorities for not sealing off the crime scene, causing evidence to be destroyed. 5 days after Kaysira went missing, on September 19th, her family contacted the media to raise awareness about the case. However, they were surprised to discover that local news outlets, including the Billings Gazette, were unaware of the situation. The Gazette said it called the sheriff's office daily for updates on the cases, but they were not notified about Kaysira's case. On the same day, Kaysira's mother, Geraldine, along with Kaysira's father, Alan, met with Captain Mike Fuss from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office. They questioned Captain Fuss about why he had not contacted them or returned their calls. Captain Mike explained that he had been preoccupied with other cases. When asked why the crime scene had not been sealed off, Captain Mike stated that according to protocol, if investigators arrived at the scene before uniformed officers, sealing off the scene was not necessary. However, if officers arrived first, the scene would be sealed off. Geraldine and Alan also inquired about Kaysira's phone, asking why law enforcement had not charged it to examine her recent communications. Captain Mike seemed surprised that the family knew about this detail and explained that the battery was dead, so they did not attempt to use it. However, Kaysira's family countered that the authorities could have charged the phone to access for recent activity. They initially claimed that not even the FBI could gain access to the phone's contents. Captain Mike reported that Kaysira had apparently died from alcohol poisoning. However, her family's offer of a $5,000 reward for any information about her death. Mike's response was unexpected and surprising, revealing a clear expression of anger. Additionally, Mike revealed that the original investigator, Jeremy Middlestead, had resigned from the case, citing that he couldn't handle it. A number of new developments occurred during this time. Kaysira's family was interviewed by law enforcement for the first time, and they also met with the Bighorn County Attorney, Jay Harris. Jay disclosed that the coroner, Terry Bullis, had a potential conflict of interest due to his roles as the owner of a funeral home business and the county medical examiner. Jay noted that under Terry's leadership, many deaths had been rapidly attributed to exposure to alcohol and natural causes. However, when the family sought answers to their questions, Jay was short-tempered and provided little clarity. On the 23rd, Kaysira's family received notice that her missing person report had not been filed and that her name was not in the missing persons database. A week later, the FBI declined to take the case, stating they required more evidence that Kaysira was murdered on the reservation. Notably, shortly before Kaysira's disappearance, she recorded a video of her 15-year-old wheelchair-bound younger brother being beaten by several police officers and shared it on social media. The incident involved deputies from the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office, resulting in disciplinary actions against the officers involved. However, one of the policemen present at the scene where Kaysira's body was found was said to be a policeman involved in the beating. This has raised suspicions that the police involved in Kaysira's death chose not to investigate, possibly to retaliate against her for her attempts to hold them responsible for her actions. 2 years after Kaysira's death, new information surfaced in August 2021. 4 witnesses came forward with accounts of the incident that led to her death. Their statements are not entirely consistent, but they generally agree on what happened. The witnesses reported that an argument took place outside a house on Rangeview Drive around 3 a.m. on August 26, 2019. Kaysira was involved in the argument with 3 other individuals, a 17-year-old girl, a 19-year-old woman, and a 23-year-old man. It was claimed that Kaysira had been at the house earlier, and one of the occupants had bought her alcohol. At the time of her death, her blood alcohol level was 0.149. The argument prompted a nearby resident to set off their car alarm, hoping the noise would cause the group to leave. And the group dispersed in different directions. Sarah was last seen heading towards the area where her body was later found. Additional information was also revealed in the new report. Forensic analysis found no foreign DNA under Sarah's fingernails. Furthermore, it was discovered that Sarah had been diagnosed with asthma shortly before her disappearance. The case remains unsolved, and the authorities are still seeking information.